Hogwarts. I'm more than a Dark Lord. Chapter 21. Boom. Ancient stone bricks kept turning, quickly forming a spiral staircase descending in the center of the dungeon. As William stood in front of the stairs, a wave of stale, decaying air hit him. Squeak. At this time, the Niffler had already moved its position to the top of William's head, nervously curling up as it looked into the darkness deep within the staircase. Calm down. Comforting the Niffler, which was inexplicably afraid, William raised his magic wand, Lumos. A cold light shone from the tip of William's magic wand, and he began to descend. After a section of the spiral staircase, there was a narrow, dilapidated, dusty dark stone corridor, with a broken stone wall blocking William's path. Revelio. The next moment, countless blue and gold light spots appeared out of thin air behind the boy, dancing lightly in the air before finally settling into a pitch-black hole beneath the stone wall. They were traces of ancient magic, a safeguard William had set for this place. With a flick of the wand, the next moment, the blue-gold, spring water, started to rise in the hole, gathering at the stone wall's edge, quickly forming a blue and gold doorway full of jade-like texture, replacing the broken stone wall. It seemed that no one had visited here in the past century. Opening the door, which clashed with the surrounding architectural style, the decaying smell in the air dissipated, replaced by a reassuring scent, as the dim light illuminated the enormous secret chamber before William. Map chamber. Knocks. The light of the magic wand extinguished. Whimper. The Niffler, which had hidden in the hat somehow, poked its head out from the edge of the robe, nervously staring at the giant room before it. Even though it was filled with sparkling objects, it uncharacteristically showed no interest in them. Descending the steps, William passed through the secret chamber's central black mirror surface. Opposite the entrance were 4 murals with completely different backgrounds. At this moment, only the second mural from the right had an elderly man with white hair, sitting quietly on a chair in the painting, his eyes slightly closed. Aware of the movement William caused, he instinctively opened his eyes. You return, wait, you are. Looking at William's familiar yet strange face, the old man blinked in confusion. Good evening, Professor Latcham. William bowed slightly in greeting, his features began to change slightly, just enough to make him appear as a completely different person. William. Is it you? William Richard? The old man asked in puzzlement. Although the boy before him looked identical to the one from a century ago, Percival Rackham obviously had many things he didn't understand. For instance, why had he disappeared completely over the past 100 years? Is it really you? The old man's voice seemed somewhat shaky. It has indeed been a long time. William nodded seriously, knowing that while only 2 months had passed for him, a full century had genuinely gone by for everyone else. But how could this be? The hint of suspicion in Rackham's eyes hadn't vanished. He was clearly awaiting a reasonable explanation. It's a long story. William sighed helplessly, reaching for his collar. Stop. He grabbed the Niffler sneaking into the depths of his hat, and pulled out a platinum necklace from its belly. The end of the necklace had a broken circular hourglass. When did it steal that? Stuffing the somewhat sad Niffler into his pocket, William caressed the time turner in his hand, inquiring, Professor, how much do you know? He referred to his disappearance, knowing that traces remain whenever something exists. He even read about his record in Hogwarts, a history. A defense against the dark arts professor who disappeared before taking office, mentioned in passing. Professor Gerard mentioned you, saying that Headmaster Blake had accepted your job application. The old man stood up, pacing back and forth in the painting, but he didn't receive your reply, which made him quite angry. That's okay. That old man was either angry or on the way to being angry every day. Wouldn't wonder he died early. William commented unreservedly, holding no fondness for the old man from the Blake family. Pure blood supremacy, arrogance, sharp-tongued, disdainful of the young. He had all the typical faults of an obstinate, pure-blood old-timer, even in intensified form. Who knew why that old man eventually agreed to accept his job application? His original plan was to hide secretly in the room of requirement. Submitting his resume was just a casual move. Rackham remained silent, knowing very little about that Headmaster Blake, only hearing about him a few times through Fitzgerald. Seems like you don't know much either, Professor. William held up the time turner to the portrait, with no intention of hiding things. The old man before him was perhaps the person most similar to him in the world, and as a fellow guardian of ancient magic, their interests and pursuits aligned completely. Based on his understanding of Professor Rackham, the chance of betrayal from the other party was absolutely zero. Those alive might be changed, but a portrait wouldn't be less stubborn than a niffler seeing golden galleons. Is this a time turner? The old man examined the pendant in William's hand, speaking with a tone of confusion. Seized from a group of black wizards selling artifacts, I did some research on it, but there was a slight mishap. William suddenly appeared somewhat guilty, as if he just realized something. Professor Rackham seemed to take notice as well, furrowing his brows. What exactly did you do? Ahem. You borrowed those ancient. William, you promised us. Ahem, it was an accident. Your accident allowed, well, you should be thankful that nothing unexpected happened in the past century. Rackham took a deep breath, now convinced of William's identity, although the story sounded exceedingly absurd. But that's ancient magic, even dedicating his life researching it hadn't unveiled its true essence. Thus, after briefly exchanging updates on recent circumstances, the old man sized up William. So, now you're once again a student at Hogwarts, and in the 5th year. History is surprisingly similar. So, Professor, I'm here to confirm the safety. For the past century, the 4 of us have taken turns on duty. Fortunately, the protections you left are complete. The old man sat back down in the chair within the painting, his fingers slightly trembling at the edge of the table. Otherwise, just relying on our portraits, we couldn't possibly stop. Were there intruders who came here? William stepped back a few paces, standing at the edge of the black pool in the secret chamber. Charles once sensed someone touching the stone wall outside the door, but they didn't come in. The old man nodded, then shook his head, pulling a magic wand from his sleeve and pointing it towards the black pool at William's feet, gently shaking it. Buzz. A clear buzzing sound rang out, and the black mirrored surface, initially indistinguishable from the surrounding floor material, began to soften and tremble, soon transforming into numerous pitch-black droplets, slowly flying into the sky. At the same time, a stone platform slowly rose before William along with the buzzing sound. It was a delicately designed blue-gold stone platform, atop which lay a narrow green wooden box. Sniffle. Niffler poked its head out from the pocket, its small beady black eyes staring intently at the transparent jewel embedded in the center of the wooden box, as if calculating how to discreetly pry it loose. Pressing Niffler's head back down, William opened the wooden box, revealing a somewhat uniquely shaped magic wand quietly lying on deep blue velvet. What level of security is this considered? Grasping the wand in his hand, a sense of stagnation began to appear within his body, and William could even feel the magic power that originally flowed through him seemingly choosing to stop in its tracks. This feeling of magical blockage was quite uncomfortable. Specialis Revelio. Manifest Original. Deep blue light blossomed from the tip of the wand, and in the next moment, the light began to converge. A blurred circular shadow began to gather at the bottom of the pool. Pure white light slowly emerged, and countless complex emotions, joy, anger, pain, started to intertwine in William's heart. Guard your heart. Percival's expression was somewhat anxious. Finite incantatum. End spell. With William's low shout, the pale light began to gradually recede, and the object hidden at the bottom of the pool finally revealed its true form. It was a loosely structured sphere, quietly floating in the air, emitting faint weak white lights all around. The secret vault hasn't changed much. Looking at the sphere that was no different from memory, William put down the wand in his hand. The feeling of magical stagnation finally disappeared, and he sighed comfortably. The secret vault, the emotion magic container, the world-destroying boom shakalaka, this thing can have many names. Unchanging can be a good thing sometimes, a sudden female voice rang out. William looked up. The leftmost painting had changed at some point. Where there once was an empty canvas now stood a woman in a red robe. The background behind her looked very familiar. Despite the difference in decor, William could recognize it as the headmaster's office at Hogwarts. Professor Gerard. The woman nodded towards William, her voice feigned calm but hidden excitement. I sensed the secret vault was opened. William, I thought you had. She didn't finish speaking, but the meaning in her words was evident. Don't Professors Rookwood and Bakar plan to come over? William didn't answer, looking at the 2 other blank paintings and asked. Their connection to Hogwarts isn't as strong, The woman shook her head. What's wrong? I just didn't want to explain the same question 4 times. What? William, you promised us. Professor Gerard's reaction compared to Professor Latcham moments ago was even more overwhelming. She stared at William, speaking word by word. The aura belonging to the headmaster began to emanate from her. Fitzgerald, William is still young. A few mistakes are normal. Percival shook his head, interrupting Fitzgerald's lecture. Normal. This. All right. Fortunately nothing went wrong. The woman sighed, somewhat helplessly. Cough, cough. Professor, I went to the headmaster's office a week ago. William coughed twice, starting to change the subject. That day I went to St. Mungo's Hospital. They hung my portrait in the corridor. The woman, as if recalling something, continued, so, should I inform the current headmaster about the situation here? The professor might be a help. Can he be trusted? William remembered the old man seemingly, visually impaired. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, the current headmaster of Hogwarts, widely regarded as the greatest wizard of the age, known for contributions including defeating the Black Wizard Grindelwald in 1945, discovering 12 uses of fire dragon blood, and significant accomplishments in alchemy with partner Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling. These lengthy titles William already knew by heart, for no reason other than the frequent appearance rates of Dumbledore cards in chocolate frogs, which led him to suspect the candy company's manager might be a fan of Dumbledore. Dumbledore can be trusted. He should be the most kind person I've met. After pondering for a moment, the woman gave a highly favorable assessment. No, still better not. Living people can't keep secrets. William shook his head. He hadn't concealed things from these guardians, not only because they were just images, but mainly because they shared common interests with him. And as for Dumbledore, to be honest, William found it hard to see through him. All right. The woman nodded without saying more. Squeak, squeak. That stone really can't be pried. I'll find something brighter for you later. Half an hour later, William was already on a journey to find the Hufflepuff common room, and had been lost for 15 minutes. Sniff. All right. Definitely brighter and bigger. Chatting casually with Niffler perched on his shoulder, William fretted over the map in his hand. He only knew he should be on the first floor, but how to get to the entrance hall? Meow. Suddenly, a somewhat raspy cat call sounded. Is it you? William, unlike other little wizards, did not fear hearing this sound while night roaming. He squatted down. Soon, an extremely skinny stray cat emerged from under the armor beside the hallway, quickly walking to William's feet, diligently rubbing against him. You're so thin. Picking up Mrs. Loris, looking at her dry belly, William sighed. Know the way to the Hufflepuff common room. I'll take you to the kitchen to catch some breeze. Meow. Mrs. Loris nodded, gently wriggling free from William's hands, leading the way ahead. Perhaps I should talk to Mr. Filch about your health. Before William stood up, he seemed to sense something. Quickly turning around, a red shadow flashed in his peripheral vision. It's so late, and there are still people wandering around at night. William pulled his watch out from the Niffler's belly and glanced at the dial. 13 minutes until 1 o'clock. He muttered in puzzlement, completely forgetting that he hadn't spent a single night in his dormitory this first week of school. Meow. Mrs. Loris had obviously noticed the figure too, her dark gray fur standing on end, and the next moment, her ear-piercing cat cry resounded throughout the floor. What's going on? What's going on? An impatient inquiry echoed from the other end of the corridor. It was Argus Filch's voice, the caretaker of Hogwarts. William had previously tried to get on good terms with him. Although the possibility of getting caught wandering at night wasn't high, it was still greater than zero. But unfortunately, apart from Mrs. Loris acting as his guide, there hadn't been much success. Being caught roaming at night would still be a hassle. William sighed and bent down to give the cat's head a rub. Then he pulled out his magic wand, tapped it lightly on the top of his head, and the next moment, William's figure vanished into the air like a chameleon. Mrs. Loris looked curiously at William disappearing before her eyes, even forgetting to chase after the shadow that flashed past the stairs. Ha! You're here. Where did he go? Tell me, was it Peeves, or those two red-headed little rascals? As soon as William disappeared, a figure came puffing from the other side of the corridor. Filch stared fiercely at Mrs. Loris squatting there, her fur still standing tall. Huff, huff. Did you see them? Meow. Mrs. Loris seemed to hesitate for a moment. She turned her gaze away from the empty space next to the armor and walked in the opposite direction from where the figure disappeared, even checking back to glance at Filch and the surrounding air. Well then, looks like you know where those rascals went. Filch obviously misunderstood Mrs. Loris's intentions. The man licked his cracked lips, showing a strange smile on his face. Lead the way quickly, I can't wait to expel a few more students. The consequences for night roaming weren't as bad as Filch said, but such monologues seemed to excite him. Having cast the disillusionment charm, William hesitated for a moment. In the end, he chose not to follow Mrs. Loris's lead. Instead, he hurried towards the staircase where the shadow had just vanished. The reason? Go back to the dormitory by 1 in the morning. What? Did they think the little prince of Hogwarts night roaming had no pride? Moreover, the shadow that had just disappeared seemed somewhat familiar. It reminded him of a thing he'd almost forgotten. Phew. Who was that with the cat just now? Was it that rather scary-looking caretaker? Ginny Weasley stopped at the corner, panting heavily. She craned her neck to peek into the hallway behind her. Luckily, she didn't see the frightening figure, not even any footsteps. The entire corridor was quiet enough for the girl to hear her own heartbeat. Dun dun dun, dun 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 dun, hum hum tilde. Bang. Hiss. The sudden humming startled the girl. She instinctively turned around and kicked. The next moment, the iron-black armor scattered across the ground, and the girl painfully clutched her right leg. Tiny tears glistened at the corners of the girl's eyes. She endured the pain and pulled out a black-covered notebook from her robe, then randomly flipped to a page, fishing out a feather quill still stained with ink from her pocket. She began quickly scribbling away in the notebook. When she stopped writing, the ink on the quill had just about run out. She stared at the marks on the white paper, seeming to wait for something, but things didn't seem to be unfolding as expected, and that sentence remained on the paper undisturbed even after the ink dried. What's going on? The unexpected development left Ginny blinking in confusion. She wanted to write something more, but the next moment, a sudden clamor arose from the other end of the corridor. Peeves. I'll never let you off the hook. Filch's ragged shout made all the portraits on the corridor instinctively look his way. A short figure with black hair and a red high hat came flying quickly from the other end of the corridor, clutching piles of dung bombs found from who knows where, continuously throwing them backward without a glance, forcing Filch to dodge clumsily. Seeing the man and ghost rushing towards her, Ginny's face instantly turned pale. She instinctively wanted to find a place to hide, but the only armor that could have sheltered her had been kicked apart just a moment ago. In her frantic attempt to challenge human limits and piece together the armor in 10 seconds, she suddenly felt a tap on her forehead. The next moment, she was amazed to find her body starting to become transparent, rendering her almost instantly the same color as the brick wall behind her. This is. Shish, don't make a sound. A faint male voice sounded. Ginny immediately covered her mouth. Peeves laughed loudly as he quickly flew past midair. Filch roared as he sprinted past the girl without even casting a glance in her direction. Didn't he go to the other side? It wasn't until those two figures completely disappeared that William lifted the disillusionment charm on both of them, then casually handed the helmet to the armor piecing itself together. Thanks. The armor politely replied, placing its head back on its neck. It's you. Ginny stared in surprise at the boy in front of her. She instinctively looked down, noticing her body had reappeared. Evening, should we talk somewhere else? As soon as he spoke, the smell of dung bombs invaded William's nostrils. He waved his magic wand, casting bubble head charms on both of them, then suggested to Ginny. It must be Fred and George, they've bought tons of dung bombs recently. Ginny peered through the dual fish tanks at William's face, the slightly humorous sight helping her relax a bit from her previous tension. All right, she nodded. Somewhere with lights still on at this hour. William looked around, then led the way to the left. I remember the Great Hall is. The Great Hall is this way. Ginny pointed in another direction. I knew that, just testing you. Eek. Don't make noise. William quickly pinched the snout of the yawning Niffler, and after a brief moment of stillness, the Niffler tried to retaliate, only to be subdued by William with one hand once again. What's its name? Having grown up in the wizarding world, Ginny recognized this creature and curiously picked up the drowsy little guy. Kabuta. And so William spontaneously gave it a name. Chirp tilde. After a moment of stupor, the iron-armored, no, Kabuta happily accepted the name. Confundo. Confounding charm. Quickly, William raised his magic wand, and the spell with a blue glow flashed and disappeared. You mean, this diary can talk to you? After doing all this, he looked up at Ginny, who was teasing Kabuta with a canute. However, the creature clearly wasn't very interested in the canute. Yes. As long as I write on it, the words disappear then, it answers my questions. Ginny nodded without hiding anything, perhaps because William had saved her twice in the span of a week, but it didn't today. William nodded. He had just tested many methods on this diary, including but not limited to the revealing spell and counter spell, but this black notebook was really just like an ordinary book, with no special features. If William hadn't seen the blue-golden glow of ancient magic on it, he would have almost believed it. No. William felt he might have stumbled into the main plotline of Harry Potter, or at least a side quest. He could even sense the malice emanating from the diary. Although it was deeply hidden, William was familiar with such emotions because the vault he had visited tonight was almost filled with this kind of power. How about you give this thing to me? William pondered for a moment and said, I can trade you for 2 new diaries. Looking at the worn cover of the black notebook, William added with some disdain. Ah, give it to you. For some reason, Ginny's face suddenly turned red, and she hesitated. No one else knew that for nearly 2 months, she had been talking almost daily with the consciousness inside the notebook. And during this time, she had told it almost all of her girlish secrets. The diary knows my secrets. Right pointing arrow. William takes the diary. Right pointing arrow. William will know my secrets. Right pointing arrow. William knows Harry. Right pointing arrow. Harry will know the secrets I want to hide. Ginny's mind whirled around twice, and she somewhat wanted to refuse. Unwilling. William noticed Ginny's thoughts and frowned, but you should know, Weasley. As a wizarding child, you should understand that such self-aware things can't be separated from the dark arts. William had always had a good impression of the Weasley surname. After all, Weasley from 100 years ago was much more dedicated than a certain Blake. Ginny fidgeted with her fingers in hesitation, her eyes lazily drifting to the diary resting between them. All right, then, William tapped the table, not insisting, you keep the diary yourself, but, he paused, drawing out the condition, I'll have to teach you how to resist this kind of thing. All right. Ginny agreed almost without hesitation. After all, it seemed to entail no harm for her. Seeing the girl nod, William raised his wand and pointed it at her temple. A dark blue light glowed, and Ginny blinked, feeling that something had changed, though she couldn't quite say what. That should do it. If it tries to make you do anything, tell me. William nodded, putting away his wand. If there's any issue, come find me. I should be able to help sort it out, though I can't handle detentions for uncompleted homework. All right, thank you. Ginny nodded again, feeling somewhat tired from all the nodding. Then that's it for today, you should get to bed. Glancing at the time on his watch, William stood up, leading Ginny out of the hall. The warm torches on the walls burned brightly, casting dappling shadows. Night walks are not a good habit, and the current caretaker is not as kind as the previous one. Aren't you on a night walk too? Ginny muttered instinctively, accepting the diary William handed back to her, then after bidding goodbye, headed towards the spiral staircase at the center of the entrance hall. Watching the fiery red figure disappear around the corner, William didn't linger too long in the entrance hall either, as Filch could return at any moment. The path from the hall to Hufflepuff was short enough for him not to get lost. He originally thought of getting his hands on this diary to study it. After all, things imbued with the essence of ancient magic were rare. But he decided to let go of this plan. The diary had already grown wary of him. Firstly, he roughly knew why the diary did not swallow the ink today, because as Ginny was writing in it, he stood right in front of her, watching the book's changes with her. Although he believed his disillusionment charm wasn't flawless, he felt it was definitely beyond the detection of a mere dark arts item, indicating that the book was more complex than just a text communicator as Ginny described. Secondly, he even recalled vividly who had slipped that book into Ginny's hands. Lastly, his recent schedule was indeed tight, and he first needed to deal with the werewolf and dark wizard issues on hand. Therefore, after a brief contemplation, he decided to let the diary remain in Ginny's possession for a few more days. After all, the semester had only just begun, and typically in such school stories, incidents wouldn't occur until the end of the term. He even applied a temporary buff using ancient magic on the girl. So, no rush. He rubbed Kabuta's rump in his arms, then pulled out the canute belonging to Ginny from its stomach, and turned towards the kitchen. He was missing those skillful little elves. How about having hot pot tonight? In Gryffindor Tower, within the girls' dormitory. Back in the dormitory, Ginny had already taken off her wizard robe. The girl, now in a thin white nightgown, sat in front of the desk with the yellow lamp light illuminating the open diary. What did you just say? The characters the girl had originally written had long since vanished, replaced by a neatly structured question. Where did you go earlier? Ginny didn't answer but wrote with an ink-stained quill. You should be able to guess, Ginny. The handwriting disappeared then reappeared. He was watching us. He didn't discover you. The girl seemed to accept this response and continued writing. Is that so? You didn't tell him anything, did you? Of course not, Tom. Ginny seemed annoyed by this unwarranted suspicion. Very well then. The Scottish Highlands in October are always shrouded in continuous rain. The cold air blowing from the Hebrides Islands permeates the castle, and the dim oil lamps fail to dispel the cold that seems to emerge from within. But today is the first weekend of October, and no little wizard in the United Kingdom would choose to miss this chance to visit Hogsmeade Village. They swarmed out of the castle gates, braving the cold wind as they walked together towards Hogsmeade. Where's your permission slip, kid? Filch rudely pressed down on the boy's shoulder, his sparse teeth crooked to one side. Madame Loris, who had grown noticeably plumper compared to half a month ago, was crouching at his feet, meowing kindly at the boy in front of her. However, that hoarse meow was more accurately described as threatening, rather than friendly. This is from Professor Sprout. No, the professor's permission is useless, kid. Filch knocked hard on the bulletin board behind him, which was covered with notes for students in third year and above going to Hogsmeade. Don't try to be clever, it says here, a guardian's handwritten signature is required. I don't have a guardian. Signature. Filch's words seemed stuck in his throat. He glanced at the boy in front of him, who still wore a smile, and his expression turned a bit grim. Fine, kid, just this once. He grumpily took the permission slip from William's hand and shoved him out of the castle. Hey, you over there, the second-year brat, don't think you can sneak out. In a foul mood, Filch looked at the crowd, then shouted as he pushed his way through. I wasn't, I was just watching. I'm just looking. A pathetic lie. Now tell me, which house are you from? However, the undeserved misfortune of some little wizard behind him had nothing to do with William at that moment. He stood in the courtyard, gazing up at the raindrops falling from the gray sky, his magic wand lightly tapping his forehead, impervious. Wink. A sleepy Kabuta poked its head out of William's wizard robe pocket, watching the raindrops evaporate into the air before they touched it. It looked a bit excited and climbed onto William's shoulder, spinning around. Hey, William. Cedric, donned in a raincoat, emerged from the crowd and cheerily greeted him. Wanna join us at Honeydukes? Mr. Flume got a new stock last week. You can't have just pineapple jam and chocolate frogs in your pockets. No, I also have. Come on, it's your first time to Hogsmeade. It's a big day, Cedric interjected, wrapping an arm around William and pulling him out of the crowd. Couldn't find you the past few weekends. After hesitating for a moment, William didn't resist, and the two of them walked the slightly muddy path to Hogsmeade. A thin mist enveloped the streets of Hogsmeade, the only village in the UK entirely populated by wizards, welcoming its weekly bustling market. Little wizards in raincoats or holding umbrellas flocked from one store to another, each with its own unique charm. The most crowded, of course, was the door to Honeydukes candy shop. A broad-shouldered, bald man was busy behind the counter, handing out packaged candies to one little wizard after another. I'll have a bag of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans and a big piece of sizzling honey candy. Wait, where's my money? William. Cedric struggled in the crowd in front of the counter, rummaging through his empty wallet. Here. William mumbled, accompanied by a slight popping sound in his mouth. Thanks, you've got to control that niffler of yours. Cedric expressed his gratitude, accepting the nuts and sickles William handed over. William, who had just popped a couple of exploding bonbons into his mouth, ignored him. But as the culprit now being punished in his pocket, Kabuta could explain it all, if only it could speak. Recently, William noticed that this Niffler's talent for theft seemed exaggerated. Picking some galleons off others had become routine, and one day, he even found a very familiar square lens in its belly. The next day, he saw Professor McGonagall with a new pair of glasses, and the day before that had been when he went to her for extra lessons after class. Who knows how Kabuta managed it, so now, whenever anyone nearby seemed to have lost something, William habitually checked its belly. Among all victims, Cedric was naturally the most severe. For some reason, Kabuta seemed to have its eyes on him, often lifting items off him during meals, be it sickles, nuts, or even just a quill. It seemed no longer limited to shiny objects. This behavior was against the natural tendencies of a Niffler, and combined with its noticeably smaller size compared to its peers, William began to suspect he might have picked up a mixed-breed Niffler, though even Professor Kettleburn, who taught magical creatures, hadn't noticed anything unusual. The impervious charm is quite useful, maybe I could use it in Quidditch matches. Cedric emerged from the crowd, walking over to William with a bag from Honeydukes, dirt-flavored. He spat out the bean. You'll need more practice to cover your whole body with the charm. William shook his head, refusing Cedric's offer of a Bertie Bott's every flavor bean. Abstaining from gambling starts with you and me. No, just keeping the water off my face is enough. Cedric abandoned the idea of taking another one and gestured, but your charm skills. Seriously, did you only start learning magic this summer? The charm he was now under was cast by William. Of course. A toffee stuck to William's teeth in the roof of his mouth. Are you sure you don't want to join our team? Even after being firmly refused last time, Cedric still occasionally brought it up beside William's ears. I've seen you, you're really good at flying. The Hufflepuff team doesn't lack members right now. If you want to join, you can kick anybody out. Alright, then I want to be the Seeker. Kick me out. You said it, kick out whoever you want. Ahem, actually, I could consider being a chaser. Cedric began to contemplate the feasibility of this deal. Diggory. A female voice suddenly sounded not far in front of the two. What? Cedric lifted his head in confusion, and in the next moment, his body stiffened. Cho Chang, a third-year Ravenclaw girl, stood looking at a group of girls not far behind her, and William immediately understood the situation. He had become a third wheel. Well, that's good. He had been wondering how to make Cedric disappear, in a friendly and unobtrusive way, and now it seemed not too difficult. All right, he's yours for today. William directly raised his hand and pushed the somewhat speechless Cedric over. Ah, you can come with us if you're free. Cho Chang, realizing the situation, attempted to extend an invitation. Have fun. But it had no effect. William simply turned around and disappeared into the crowd. Ah. A girl next to Cho Chang opened her mouth in disappointment, her reddish gold curls drooping down. Creak. The old wooden door emitted the sound of disrepair. Cold wind seeped into the room through the gaps in the door as a tall, cloaked figure squeezed in from outside. A layer of mist covered his tangled gray hair as he surveyed the small, dark, and grimy room, his nose twitching slightly. The strong smell of mutton almost made him retch. Thick grime piled on the few bay windows along the walls blocked out the already dim light from outside. Some candle stubs on the coarse wooden tables served as the tavern's only light source. At first glance, one might think it was a packed dirt floor, but upon stepping on it, one realized the stone floor seemed to have accumulated centuries of filth. The sound of the door opening didn't attract much attention, or rather, there weren't many people in the tavern to notice. Only the tavern keeper behind the counter fixed his gaze on the new guest. His hand polishing a glass paused slightly, and his free hand subtly reached toward his waist. But the man, well known from the Ministry of Magic's wanted posters, didn't erupt as the tavern keeper imagined. Instead, he walked directly to a table and sat down, dropping his suitcase heavily on the well-worn wooden table. Dust flew up. Not here to cause trouble. The tavern keeper's hand holding the magic wand trembled slightly. After a fleeting assessment, he decided not to stir trouble and instead continued wiping the equally dirty glass with his dirty rag. Truth be told, no one could say for sure which was dirtier between the two. You just came like this. Looking at the man who had taken a seat opposite her, the woman cloaked in purple seemed to twitch slightly at the corners of her eyes. Don't you know about the British Ministry of Magic's wanted notice for you? What's the difference? Fenrir Greyback grinned, revealing a strange smile, his sharp teeth looking as if they could bite through metal. The place is crawling with kids from Hogwarts today. The Ministry of Magic wouldn't dare act against me here, even if Aurors have surrounded the place. Fenrir was right. A werewolf's intimidation factor extended beyond his apparent combat prowess. Even being bitten by an untransformed werewolf could leave a person with lasting afflictions for life. So, regardless of whether the Ministry of Magic wanted to, they'd have to wait until he left Hogsmeade. As for after he left Hogsmeade, then really, the world would be his oyster. Did you bring it? The woman seemed at a loss for words, shaking her head, her dark purple robe swaying slightly. I thought you weren't blind. Of course. The woman reached for the suitcase on the table, her tone deepening. But the next moment, a large, twisted hand pressed down on hers, its sharp claws almost pressing against the woman's, or rather, the man's artery. Yes, a man. William felt a hand distinctly not belonging to a woman. Indeed, after some consideration, William chose to drink the bottle of polyjuice potion. The polyjuice potion belonging to Fenrir Greyback was pitch black like crude oil, and the stench almost made William feel like he had swallowed a mouthful of refined London sewer. Honestly, he hadn't expected that the first hurdle of this mission would occur in a place like this. Unexpected, yet within reason. After all, the taste of polyjuice potion often depended on the target you meant to transform into. The kinder the target was, the more appealing the potion's color would be. Yet Fenrir clearly had no connection to kindness, the baddest of the bad, and a scoundrel's scoundrel were terms far more fitting for him. However, William thought that if he could drink the polyjuice potion of Headmaster Black 100 years ago, then dealing with a werewolf should be no issue, but compared to now, the most unpopular headmaster in Hogwarts history seemed saintly by comparison. After enduring for about 2.5 minutes in the alley, William finally managed to stagger into the Hog's Head Inn. Finishing early meant wrapping up early. Even though he still had half a bottle left, he had no desire to take a second sip of the polyjuice potion. What are you doing? The man dared not move, feeling William's sharp nails lightly pressing against his wrist. It wasn't a deadly tactic, but no one wished to be harmed by a werewolf, even if he hadn't transformed. Payment. You must pay first before I hand over the goods. William lightly squeezed the man's wrist in a classic restraint, allowing him to follow instantly if the man tried to disapparate. As for where the man might flee to, he hoped the man might directly flee back to the headquarters of the Black Wizard, sparing a lot of unnecessary steps. Yet now, William found himself somewhat out of step with the times. Perhaps the Ashwinder and Poacher had left too deep an impression on him. He hadn't realized that today's Black Wizards, due to Voldemort's disappearance, were no longer as rampant as 100 years ago. You must let go first so I can get the payment for you. You have 2 hands, friend. Sweat dripped from the man's brow, his thoughts racing. He'd prepared no payment at all. Instant apparition upon receiving the goods had always been his plan. Logically, a werewolf shouldn't have figured it out. Are you toying with me? William tilted his head, a pair of sharp fangs protruding from his lips. The man took a deep breath and pulled back the dark purple cloak from his head with his unrestricted hand. He was a short, stout man with long, messy ginger hair tied behind his head, his unkempt appearance looking extremely scruffy. Mundungus Fletcher, I told you not to show up at the Hog's Head Inn. The tavern keeper's voice sounded from nearby. He had already drawn his wand from his waist, but someone moved even faster. Stupefy. The bright red spell light flared up in the tavern and quickly subsided back into silence. Mundungus Fletcher, that's your name? William asked, putting away his wand and gazing at the man, whose expression had already turned blank, as though seeing something incomprehensible. At this moment in the Hog's Head Inn, only 2 remained conscious. Do we still have anything to discuss? At long last, Mundungus, having shed his disguise, came to his senses, feigning a smile as he looked at the man in front of him. Talk. Yes, I mean. Talk about what? About how you deceived me. William could already tell that the man in front of him was full of lies. That dumb wolf was probably tricked by him, which was very common in the lower levels of the wizarding world. 100 years ago, he had also mingled in this circle for a while. It was that experience that allowed him to intercept a time turner, and then a little accident happened. Cold sweat dripped down the man's forehead as he glanced around with the corner of his eye. The 5 or 6 people originally in the shop were all slumped in their seats now, and the bartender who had rushed out from behind the counter was lying peacefully on the floor, which hadn't been cleaned for centuries. Others might not know who this bartender was, but Mundungus knew very well inside, yet he was knocked out by this werewolf with just a spell. Even a single spell knocked out everyone present. It was simply incredible. He thought this werewolf didn't have much magic ability. After all, for creatures like werewolves, claws and sharp teeth are often more useful than a magic wand. He needed to figure out a way to save himself. Quickly, Dung, you've been mingling in the magic realm for over 30 years, start turning your brain. The werewolf's patience might have worn thin, as he used his other free hand to clamp around the man's neck, lifting the man, who was only 5 feet 4 inches tall, into the air, his bandy legs flailing somewhat frantically. Crucio. The magic wand lit up. Wait, although I did deceive you, but I do know someone who knows the whereabouts of those werewolves. The man's face was filled with terror, speaking that tongue-twister-like sentence rapidly, fearing that the next moment the Crucio curse would land on him. He didn't think the other party dared not to, given that this former werewolf leader had enough known crimes on his head to warrant a lifetime stay in Azkaban, let alone a measly unforgivable. Keep talking. William nodded, lowering his magic wand. He was well aware that, when dealing with these slick and deceitful lower-level wizards, the deterrence of a gun loaded with bullets was often more effective than bullets landing directly on one's body. I happen to know a werewolf's address, and you should know, werewolves generally don't live in seclusion. Mundungus said while grasping at the hand squeezing his neck, seemingly wanting William to ease his grip a bit. Where is it? Edinburgh. If you're willing, I can take you there right now. William's mouth twitched slightly, feeling something unusual in his body. He knew the polyjuice potion's time was almost up. This probably had a lot to do with him only ingesting a sip, but he really didn't want to take another sip. His thoughts spinning, he placed the trembling man back down, gently, tidying his messy collar. Don't be so tense, Mr. Fletcher, today will end here, I have other matters to attend to. Really? Feeling the sharp nails circling around his neck, Mundungus gulped with difficulty. Of course, William knew his time was running out, pressing the magic wand against the man's neck, imprint. In the next moment, a blue light shone from the tip of the wand, with deep blue markings like thorns creeping up Mundungus's face. What is this? The man's breathing started to get heavy, clearly sensing something extra on his body. On Christmas night, I'll be waiting under the 3rd tree at the entrance of Hogsmeade Village. William didn't directly answer, just patting the man's face, then grabbing the suitcase on the table. Without further explanation, in the next moment, with a sound like belts clashing, he disappeared from the spot. Phew. It wasn't until the surroundings fell completely silent that Mundungus finally took a deep breath. It all seemed like a dream, but seeing the bartender still lying unconscious on the ground, he touched his face. Well, it wasn't a dream. Mundungus's expression turned grim. He wrapped his face with his robe again and vanished instantly from the spot. He needed to find someone to remove the thing from his face. As for Christmas, not even a dog would come back. Time seemed to pass, the light on the mottled sash windows dimming even more. A goat emerged from behind the bar, walking to the unconscious bartender and nudging him hard. The gradually awakening bartender sat up from the floor, feeling around for his glasses and placing them on his nose, looking somewhat dazedly at the goat licking him. The pain in his chest slowly reminded him of everything that had happened before. People were gone. Looking at his robe covered in mud, he took a laborious breath. He might need to mop the floor. Where did you go today? 3 Broomsticks. Oh, the butterbeer at the 3 Broomsticks and Madame Rosemerta are indeed top-notch. Seed, I know you just got back from a date, but could you please not speculate? In the evening, as the drizzle faded away, the orange-red sunset pierced through the clouds, the two of them walking side by side on the path back to the castle. I'm not interested in butterbeer. We haven't even been on a. Cedric's face noticeably reddened but quickly realized something. Wait, what did you just say? Nothing. Well, looks like Marietta is imagining things. Who is that? The two walked through the garden in front of the castle together. William even greeted Mrs. Loris, who was squatting by the gate. That's the girl next to Cho, with the long golden hair, Cedric said with gestures, seeming to think it would help William remember. She quite likes you and says you like her too. I really don't know her. Then maybe next time you can join us. William, do you have some time now? As the two just reached the hall, they were stopped by two figures seemingly waiting for a while. Ginny. Seeing the girl with the fiery red hair standing in front of him, William slightly furrowed his brows. Behind Ginny was another girl, Luna. Since the start of the term, they hadn't run into each other outside the Great Hall, but that might have a lot to do with William sticking largely to the first floor and the Hufflepuff basement apart from classes. Then I'll be off. As Cedric wisely left the hall, Ginny acted like she couldn't hold back anymore, pulling William aside urgently, blurting out. The diary is missing. Lost. Yes, I've looked everywhere. When? I realized it was missing when I woke up a few days ago. So she's. William nodded his head, not showing urgency, but instead looked at Luna, who was staring at the portrait absent-mindedly behind Ginny. I ran into Luna near the tower this morning. She offered to help me. Perhaps influenced by William's demeanor, the urgency in Ginny's voice slowly disappeared. She took a breath and continued, we've been searching the castle for several days. Common room, classrooms, bathrooms. We've looked everywhere, but still haven't seen it. It's okay. If it's lost, it's lost, it's not important. William waved his hand, signaling the others to stay calm. But, didn't you say it was related to dark arts? Ginny was a little dumbfounded. If someone else picks it up. Yes, it does sound dangerous. Luna nodded along. Alright, I didn't want to say it originally, but now that we're here. William nodded, took a deep breath, his expression slightly darkened. Ginny waited nervously for the sentence, because she lost the item and had refused William's previous suggestion of him keeping it, so even if the result was getting expelled from Hogwarts after telling the professors, she could accept it. Let's eat first. Can you handle spicy? Sir, these are the spices you mentioned last time. In Hogwarts' kitchen, a house elf was eagerly introducing the things on the shelf to William. These were items from the list William provided. By the late 20th century, there were quite a few Chinese immigrants in Great Britain, making these supplies easier to get than 100 years ago. It's mealtime now, and the kitchen was bustling with activity. Countless dishes were placed on the long table at the center of the kitchen and then disappeared. Among them were dishes William added to the Hogwarts kitchen menu. Ahem. Well done, Luck. Even just receiving a casual compliment gave the house elf following William great encouragement. Although he stammered without saying much, his face lit up with genuine delight. All right, you go ahead and get busy. After sending the elf away, William turned around and sat across from Ginny and Luna. They were sitting at a small table in the kitchen. This was a special spot William used for private meals, which Hufflepuff students often borrowed when not going to the dining hall. Slow down your eating, no one's taking it from you. Placing Kabuta on the table to let it feed itself, William picked up his chopsticks and watched Ginny stuff chicken into her mouth. Her concern for her image vanished after the first bite. Woo woo, Ginny's face was flushed red, the color on her cheeks almost matching her hair. She says it's very spicy, Luna translated. She refrained from touching the frightening plate of chili, more interested in the niffler on the table. William waved his magic wand, and 3 cups of pumpkin juice appeared on the table. For some reason, recently Hogwarts' kitchen had an increasing stockpile of chicken and pumpkin. The abundance of pumpkins William understood, as the ones he expanded using the engorgement charm were enough to feed the school's students and professors for half a month, but the chickens. No clue. Ahem. Downing the pumpkin juice, Ginny tried to hold the chopsticks again, struggling to use the 2 wooden sticks to pick up food, but challenges are meant to be overcome. So, tell me, how did you lose the diary? After a period of silent eating, William finally brought the conversation back to the main topic. Last weekend evening, I was talking to it in the common room, trying to find out what it truly was. Ginny paused, squinting slightly as she recalled, then continued, but by early morning the day before yesterday, it vanished. I searched through all my belongings these days. At first I suspected my roommates, but why would they take a seemingly useless old diary? So for these past days, she has been helping me search from the common room all the way to the astronomy tower. Luna pulled out her necklace carved from glass from Kabuta's pocket, playing happily with the niffler. But it's been nowhere to be found. Maybe I left it in the common room last night, but I asked many people and no one admitted picking up a black notebook, Ginny added, the two singing in unison as if they rehearsed it. It's been several days already. William nodded. All right. He stared at the girl's crown. The once vibrant blue-green glow was gone. He roughly had a guess. That diary might have somehow consumed the defensive measure he placed on Ginny. This was truly unexpected. He initially thought it was just an ordinary and ancient, powerless dark arts item, but apparent, anything linked to ancient magic is far from simple. Now, searching for a dark arts item that regained power inside a castle is no easy task. Perhaps, he should take some time to visit the diary's former owner. After reassuring the first-year students and promising not to report them, to have Ginny sent to Azkaban, William packed some roast meat and left the kitchen. He returned to the room of requirement using the dormitory's fireplace, tossed the meat to a certain greedy creature, and chose to cast aside these unrelated interruptions and started his homework. Despite having rewards of no homework in Transfiguration class, Herbology, Magical Creatures class, and other subjects due to excellent performance in several oral exams and good post-class study results, he still had to tackle assignments in Defense Against Dark Arts, Magic History, and Potions class himself. The reason being he didn't want to deal with one professor, another professor simply ignored him, and the last one was someone he had a direct feud with. A certain unnamed Potions class professor specifically assigned him 3 additional 7-inch essays during holidays. He attempted to appeal to Professor McGonagall, but she couldn't interfere with another professor's teaching. Tisk. One day he would completely wipe clean that old bat's head. The damp October faded away in the ceaseless drizzle, with classes, breaks, nightly escapades into the Forbidden Forest, battling trolls, and collecting spider corpses. William's ordinary, dull, and boring school routine continued, while the progress in finding the diary was unusually slow, or rather, there was no progress at all. Just as William had guessed, when a sentient dark magical artifact wants to hide itself, it becomes exceedingly difficult to find. Not to mention that it consumed the magic William left on Ginny, possibly even strengthened it further. It might lie dormant for a week, a semester, or perhaps decades. Who would know? Yet, the situation wasn't severe. It was just a talking diary with some control magic, at most manipulating Ginny to wander at night into the girl's bathroom. In that sense, this Tom must be a total creep, right? The uneventful days passed quickly until Halloween, a festive atmosphere infecting everyone, with giant pumpkins carved into various skull-faced lanterns, piled in every corner of the hall, while decorative live bats flapped their wings gently by the candlelight. Harry Potter was now deeply regretting the rash decision he made earlier. The boy cast a longing glance at the glittering decorations inside the hall, and at Hagrid, who was waving to them with a large pumpkin in his arms, as he walked away heavily toward the other direction from the hall. Speaking of which, going to a Death Day party, no matter how heavy-hearted, shouldn't be a problem, right? Where's Ron? Seeing Hermione standing alone on the inside of the entrance hall, Harry puzzledly adjusted his glasses. I don't know, I thought he was with you. Hermione was obviously bewildered too. Didn't you call him when you left the dormitory? I haven't seen him all day. Harry shook his head. They had arranged to meet here a few days ago to attend Nearly Headless Nick's 500th Death Day party together, to thank him for saving Harry from Filch's hands. For some reason, since about a month ago, Harry had felt that something about Ron's relationship with them had changed. As if overnight, nothing special had happened. Yet Ron suddenly talked much less, becoming reticent and frequently acting alone. He hadn't seen Ron returning to the dorm many nights, only to find him sleeping soundly in his bed the next morning. Harry tried to have a heart-to-heart talk with Ron, because Hermione thought it might be adolescent troubles, but Ron would most often brush it off with a few words. Until recently, he almost entirely lost interest in talking. Maybe we should see what he's been up to these nights. Hermione noticed Ron's recent odd behavior too. She furrowed her brow and suggested an idea: use your invisibility cloak. So now, we go back to the hall to look for him. Harry paused, a guilty tone in his voice. He simply didn't want to attend the Death Day party, and if there was a reason, he believed Nearly Headless Nick would forgive him, probably. But Hermione clearly wasn't on the same page. She raised her eyebrows, the frizzy hair at the back of her head slightly puffing up. A promise is a promise. You said you would attend the Death Day party. But Ron. Harry attempted to resist. That's an issue for tonight. Without leaving room for argument, Hermione pushed Harry towards the direction of the dungeon. To Harry's dismay, attending the Death Day party turned out to be an utterly dreadful decision, and Hermione had to reluctantly agree in the end. But Harry, promised Nick, to attend, so I can't regret it, Stop talking, Hermione. Holding the about to throw up Hermione but still stubbornly lamenting, Harry said helplessly. Just now, Peeves had jumped out from nowhere, giving Hermione a fright. The girl almost plunged headfirst into a platter of at least 3-month-old rotten fish guts. Though quick-eyed Harry managed to grab Hermione's collar, saving her from disaster, the girl couldn't avoid catching a whiff of the stench. Hey, Harry. Nearly headless Nick floated over from the crowd. No, the group of ghosts, standing proudly beside Harry. What do you think? Quite a turnout, isn't it? Yes, Nick, wonderful, but my friend isn't feeling too well. Harry interrupted Nick's words, a hint of urgency on his face. No, Harry. I still can. Hermione was still struggling. No, you can't. Harry bluntly cut off Hermione, then turned smilingly to nearly headless Nick. Really, Nick, I've got to take her to the infirmary. Oh, all right then, Harry. I'm just glad you came. Relieved at getting Nick's approval, Harry carefully dodged the headless Knight Order rushing out of a wall and dragged Hermione out of the dungeon hosting the Death Day party. Finally breathing fresh air, Hermione seemed to come back to life. Shall we head to the hall now? She looked at the time on her watch. We might still catch the last of the dessert. I thought you couldn't bear to leave that place. Harry muttered discontentedly. If not for Hermione's insistence, he should have been able to more than just catch dessert. But the next moment, Harry's steps halted slightly. He heard it. Tear you apart, kill you. The spine-chilling voice echoed once more. Harry's pupils dilated suddenly. Yes, he suddenly remembered what he had forgotten during those first few weeks of term. So, he stumbled to a halt, ear pressed against the stone wall, listening intently while surveying his surroundings, eyes narrowed as he searched up and down the dimly lit corridor. Harry. Shish. Listen. So starving, it's been so long. Kill, it's time. Listen to what? Hermione asked in confusion. Harry didn't answer. He listened attentively to the gradually weakening voice and then hurried in the direction it faded. Up there, it's up there. He almost frantically murmured. Wait, Harry. The two of them ran quickly down the corridor, one after the other, until they heard sounds of a scuffle at a corner not far ahead. It's you, Weasley kid. I finally caught you. I knew it was you. Let go of me. That's Ron's voice. Hermione recognized the voice of the young wizard behind them. At this moment, she could not spare the time to ask Harry what he'd heard, but could only anxiously run alongside him in that direction. She saw them, Ron and Filch, in a heated dispute. Ron. Hermione. Ron looked down the stairs upon hearing the commotion. As for you two miscreants, you're in cahoots too, aren't yo? Filch's words were cut short, both his and Ron's expressions turning to horror, as if they had seen something terrifying. In the next moment, time seemed frozen by some mysterious force, with both locked in a bizarre grappling pose, stuck in place. Early romances are bad for studying. I'm not interested in that Mary or whatever, you go by yourself this time. Ah, all right. Cedric quickly nodded, and after speaking, he quickened his pace, squeezing into the middle of the crowd. Ah, youth. Watching the two figures squeezed together in the crowd, William sighed softly. Ever since that trip to Hogsmeade, the relationship between Cedric and that Ravenclaw girl had progressed rapidly, hanging out together at every opportunity. Tonight was no exception. That fool planned to escort the girl back to her dormitory, claiming the castle wasn't safe at night. Teenage lovebirds really are blind. But William didn't mind. Tonight's Halloween feast was as lavish as the Last Supper, especially those puddings at the end. His mood was quite good after ingesting enough sweets, so accompanying Cedric upstairs for 2 rounds was fine. After all, he knew the way. Give it back to him. Feeling the sudden extra weight on his shoulder, William slightly turned his head and saw the Niffler that had just climbed onto him. Before Kabuta could greet him with its tiny short hands, William pinched its head and lifted it up. Whimper. That was a gift from me to him, Luna protested softly, clearly unhappy with William's assault on the Niffler. He doesn't need sickles, you should keep it and buy yourself some candy. William didn't stop his actions and continued to rummage in Kabuta's belly, pulling out 2 shiny silver coins, which he then tossed back to the girl. Swapping for some glass beads or something, he likes those, I recall you have lots. He turned to look at Luna, noticing the necklace on her neck. Oh, today it was made of butterbeer corks. Alright, maybe I can use it to buy a few more copies of the Quibbler, Luna said in her usual airy tone as she accepted the sickles. The Quibbler. Isn't that your family's magazine? Yeah, do you want one? I can give you a set. Better not. William had browsed that magazine once, how to say, well, Luna wanting to boost her family's magazine sales wasn't a bad thing. Okay then. The refused girl wasn't upset, she simply nodded lightly. They walked side by side at the back of the crowd, slowly making their way up the castle's stone steps. What's wrong with you tonight? William's gaze shifted beyond Luna, looking at the girl on the other side. Ginny's behavior was unusual tonight, her quiet demeanor not like her usual self. I don't know, but I have this bad premonition. Upon hearing the voice, Ginny was momentarily stunned, only realizing afterward that William was addressing her. She shook her head, her shoulders trembling involuntarily. Something bad has happened. Something bad. William slightly furrowed his brow. Ginny's appearance did not seem baseless, and since she had once been influenced by a diary contaminated with dark arts, perhaps. The people ahead suddenly stopped. Those who stand against the air, that means you, mudblood. A shrill voice sounded at the front of the crowd, instantly silencing the bustling conversations. The burning candle flames flickered along the dim corridor's sides, and an inexplicable fear began to spread among the crowd. What happened? Luna tiptoed, but her first-year height was clearly insufficient to see the scene behind the crowd. It's true. Ginny's voice trembled slightly as she curled up her body, her eyes filled with fear, staring at William. My premonition was correct, that was Malfoy just now, definitely something's happened. Yes, your premonition was right. William's already furrowed brow tightened further. Although separated by dozens of people, he could still make out what was happening at the very front of the crowd. A red-haired Ron Weasley was grappling with the caretaker Filch, but the pose unchanged from start to finish suggested this was more serious than a young wizard caught by the caretaker causing trouble in the castle. The phrase, "The secret chamber has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware," was clearly visible in scarlet letters on the side wall of the corridor, though the final word remained unfinished. Meow. A shrill cat's cry sounded behind William. The next moment, a gray shadow flashed past William, but he managed to scoop it up with one hand. Mrs. Loris tried to wriggle, but upon seeing William, instinctively ceased her struggles. Make way. William gently waved, creating a gap in the crowd before him, holding Mrs. Loris as he made his way through. Is that your brother? Luna peered through the gap and witnessed the scene at the corridor's center. She promptly patted Ginny beside her, hesitantly asking. Ginny didn't answer but followed closely behind William. Meow. The moment Mrs. Loris spotted Mr. Filch, she struggled to break free from William's grasp to run to the man's side. But to avoid disturbing the crime scene, William did not release his grip on Mrs. Loris. Upon seeing the two people standing motionless, he turned to the two sole suspects at the scene. No. Meeting William's eyes, Harry shook his head hopelessly. Argus. Dumbledore appeared at the scene in the next instant, accompanied by many teachers. His gaze paused momentarily on everyone present, the flickering firelight dancing on his glasses perched atop the bridge of his nose. Finally, his eyes rested on the motionless Filch and Ron. Professor. Hermione seemed about to speak, but Dumbledore shook his head, interrupting her. Come with me, Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, Dumbledore said. Minerva, please take Mr. Weasley and Argus. Headmaster, my office is closest. Lockhart briskly stepped forward. It's right upstairs, you can. Thank you, Gilderoy, Dumbledore said. Quietly, the crowd split open to allow them passage. Lockhart appeared uncommonly excited, looking rather full of himself, and he hurriedly tailed Dumbledore. Professor McGonagall and Snape followed, while Ron and Filch floated gently ahead of them.
A squib, and a Weasley, the disgrace of the pure bloods, Malfoy drawled, dramatically turning to the crowd behind him. Who'll be next? Do I even need to say? Mudby. Shut up. Ginny screamed, cutting off Malfoy's sermon. Oh, Weasley, does your brother frighten you, or? Shut up, Malfoy. Percy stepped out from the crowd. Another Weasley. 5 points from Slytherin. Percy's voice was unusually cold. HMPH. Malfoy fell silent, evidently somewhat intimidated by the authority of the prefect. That's it, everyone return to your dorms, Percy loudly announced from the center of the crowd. Then, he glanced at Ginny. You too, Ronnie won't be in any trouble. Wait, where's the transfer student? Seeing Ginny and Luna standing together, Percy was momentarily taken aback. He clearly remembered that someone else was just there. A group of people entered Lockhart's dimly lit office. Soon after, a commotion ensued, and several paintings of Lockhart hanging on the wall seemed to flee from their frames. Meanwhile, the real Lockhart lit the candle on the table and retreated backward with a trace of excitement still lingering on his face. Ron and Filch were placed in the middle of the office, still maintaining their wrestling position. Ron appeared to want to escape, but Filch had him by the wrist, leaving him immobile. Together, they stared at the ground, their eyes brimmed with terror. Meow. Mrs. Loris dashed out from the corner, standing upright and clawing desperately at Filch's legs. Unfortunately, her owner could no longer respond as he usually would. Dumbledore stood in front of Ron, his crooked long nose almost touching the boy's face, as the old man pondered over the boy intently behind his half-moon spectacles. After a while, he finally straightened up. It must be a charm that killed them. Such a pity. Filch was a good caretaker, dutifully cleaning the classrooms. Ron Weasley was a good, little wizard. Lockhart put on a pained expression. I remember a very similar incident in Ouagadougou, he continued, a series of attacks detailed in my autobiography. At the time, I provided all sorts of protective talismans to the people, quickly resolving the problem. They're not dead, Lockhart, even a fool can see that. Snape's impatient voice came from the shadows of the office. Yes, Severus, Dumbledore said, they've been petrified. I was thinking the same. Actually, in another of my autobiographies. Lockhart promptly said. So, Albus, what's going on here? Professor McGonagall interrupted Lockhart's impending diatribe. Perhaps we should consult the 2 witnesses at the scene. Snape's sinister voice sounded as he emerged from the shadows, leading everyone, including Mrs. Loris who crouched by Dumbledore's feet, towards the opposite side of the office, where the candlelight couldn't reach. 3 little wizards were sitting upright. Wait, 3. Looking at the additional figure that shouldn't have been there, Snape gritted his teeth. William Richard, why are you here? Cough. Actually, I'm the victim's family. Oh. I didn't know you had relatives with the Weasley family. A friend. William clapped his hands, and Mrs. Loris cooperatively came over, weakly rubbing against William's leg. Watching the cat that never took to anyone besides Filch curling next to William's foot, Snape took a deep breath. Professor, surely you wouldn't want to see a little undernourished cat, with its owner in trouble, still forced to follow you around, right? So, I brought her over. Professor, could you really be so heartless? Placing Mrs. Loris on his lap, William shook his head, beginning a moral coercion. Snape's vision darkened, his morality may have been sparse, but not entirely absent. PFF'd. Seeing Snape unable to retort with a defeated expression, Harry couldn't hold back his laughter. The sound of air leaking resonated near his mouth. While remaining silent might have been better, Snape now seemed to have found an outlet, immediately shifting his target. Perhaps we should question Potter and his friend Miss Granger, why they appeared there at that time, why they went to the upper corridor, and why they missed the Halloween feast. We went to the Death Day party. Nearly headless Nick hosted a banquet. Hundreds of ghosts attended. Nick, Sir Fatty, Peeves, they can all attest to our presence there, Harry and Hermione hastily explained. But what about afterward? Why not come to the feast? Snape pressed, his dark eyes gleaming in the candlelight, his sallow complexion appearing pale. Why up to the corridor? Why? I must remind you, Severus, Harry and Miss Granger are friends of Weasley. I believe it's impossible for them to be responsible, Professor McGonagall interjected, beside whom Harry and Hermione cast grateful glances. Of course, I'm simply asking Mr. Potter, why? Snape persisted, repeating himself once more. Hermione instinctively glanced at Harry. William noticed and also looked over. We wanted. Harry hesitated, then noticed the boy at the back of the group staring at the floor. We wanted to find Ron, as he promised to join us at the Death Day party, but eventually, he wasn't there. For some reason, Harry entirely avoided mentioning the sinister voice. Why not come to the hall? We went to the hall, but didn't. Lies. Snape loudly interrupted Harry's weak defense, his unpleasant smile becoming more pronounced. I think, Headmaster, Mr. Potter clearly isn't being truthful. I believe we ought to take some measures to punish him, such as removing him from the Quidditch team. That's rather ugly, Professor. William interjected appropriately. Even without Potter, Slytherin might not win the match. An uncomfortable silence ensued. It's not your place to speak. Out, Richard. Snape nearly roared. Freedom of speech, Professor. William muttered loudly, casting his gaze towards the silent Dumbledore. Two pairs of blue eyes met each other. Mr. Richard may stay, Severus. Dumbledore finally halted the dispute. As he just said, he's a friend of the victim's family. William, arrogantly, lifted Mrs. Loris. Then, Potter, he must be punished. Snape hadn't given up. No evidence suggests Potter is at fault, Professor McGonagall interrupted again. Isn't he? Without evidence proving him guilty, he remains innocent. Dumbledore shook his head, softly closing the debate. Professor Sprout has recently obtained some mandrakes. Once matured, we'll have a potion to revive them. I can prepare it, Lockhart interjected. I must have prepared it 100 times. I can brew the mandrake reviving potion in my sleep. Where did he get so many mandrakes? From robbing the Ministry of Magic. William was puzzled why Dumbledore hadn't expelled this foolish braggart. Could it be the old man was not only deaf but blind as well? Perhaps, Minerva, you'd be willing to help us get Argus and Weasley to the hospital wing, hand them over to Ms. Pomfrey. Dumbledore blatantly ignored Lockhart, addressing Professor McGonagall. If Mr. Weasley's parents come, you may direct them to my office. I can assist, Professor, happens to be on my way. William stood up holding Mrs. Loris. Without waiting for refusal, he flicked his wand, Wingardium Leviosa. In the next moment, Ron floated up shakily. All right, mind your magic output. Professor McGonagall nodded, conveniently treating this as an extracurricular tutorial on the levitating spell. William followed Professor McGonagall out of Lockhart's office, soon finding Ms. Pomfrey still on duty. As they settled the petrified pair, Professor McGonagall stepped outside to brief Ms. Pomfrey, leaving William alone in the infirmary. Watching thoughtfully, the two people lying side by side on a large makeshift bed, since Filch held too tightly, Dumbledore ordered not to forcibly separate them. William hesitated, then retreated 2 steps. Diary, Accio. Whoosh. A dark mass flew out from Ron's pants. Initially intending to catch it, William swiftly sidestepped. Why would someone stash a diary in their pants? Do not disturb the patient's rest. The sound of the diary hitting the wall caught the attention of the overseer. No, it caught Madame Pomfrey's attention. She pushed open the door and yelled softly at William. Oh, okay. Really? Are you sure I can disturb them? Picking up the diary from the floor, William gazed blankly at the 2 immobile statues on the bed. Madame Pomfrey seemed to realize her slip of the tongue and, after a brief silence, said, quickly, come out. This time her voice was much softer. William obediently walked out the door, where Professor McGonagall was waiting for him not far away. You should head back to the common room. Professor McGonagall led William downstairs with a tense face. This is terrible. Both the caretaker and a student have been attacked, and we don't even know who the culprit is. I still have to think about how to explain this to Molly. The two parted ways at the entrance hall, and as he watched Professor McGonagall quickly disappear around the corner, William looked at the diary in his hand. He now had a good idea of who the culprit was. In the Hufflepuff common room, the warm flames danced in the fireplace. The time was nearing midnight, and most of the little wizards had returned to their dormitories. Only a few scattered figures remained in the common room. William, you're finally back. Why is she with you? Seeing William crawl in from the barrel entrance, Cedric stood up from the fireplace and, noticing Mrs. Loris perched on William's shoulder, curiously asked. Something happened to Filch, and there's no one to take care of her.
Dumbledore asked me to bring her back. William sat down on the couch by the fireplace, and Mrs. Loris, who had been listlessly following the entire way, silently lay down by the fire. Seeing the cat leave, Kabuta slowly climbed onto William's shoulder and stuck out its tongue in displeasure at Mrs. Loris's back. Oh, Cedric nodded knowingly, then glanced around before leaning in closer to William to ask softly, "So, you went to the office with the professors. What exactly happened?" The boy's eyes were full of curiosity. Not sure, Dumbledore couldn't find the reason either. William casually tossed logs into the fire. Ron and Filch were sent to the hospital wing. They'll probably be there until Professor Sprout's mandrake matures. So, does that mean our night escapades won't be caught by Filch that old, ahem. Cedric was a little excited, but he clearly realized his reaction was a bit much, so he lowered his voice again, to avoid being overheard by Mrs. Loris. Yes. William nodded, then looked at the boy who was already planning nightly adventures with Cho Chang with a sympathetic look. But now professors are taking turns on duty. If you don't want to end up in detention with Snape or Lockhart, you'd better abandon the idea. Ah. The boy's expression became stiff as he stared at William for a long time before finally falling back onto the couch in resignation. All right, forget it. I don't want to run into that greasy old bat at midnight. Cedric, full of sorrow, returned to his dormitory, leaving William alone in the common room. Noticing he was alone, William finally began to examine the notebook in his hand. He didn't even need to open it like last time. He could feel the malevolent intent emanating from the black pages. It seemed he guessed right. This notebook indeed absorbed energy. And the source of the energy could almost certainly be the protective mechanism he said in Ginny's mind. Was it a case of kind intentions gone wrong? Evidently, after William caught her, Ginny's attitude towards the diary changed, and this change was probably noticed by the consciousness within the diary, leading it to switch targets, taking advantage of Ginny leaving it in the common room to select a new, brainwashing, target. It might even be that Ginny leaving the diary in the common room was manipulated by the diary itself. After all, according to the girl herself, except for trips to the bathroom and bathing, she rarely let this thing out of her sight. How could she have left it in the common room for an entire night just because of a little accident? The secret chamber has been opened. Enemies of the air. William silently recited the words painted on the wall. He initially thought the diary wasn't that important, but now it seemed the attack and the business about heirs and secret chambers were inextricably linked to it. Sure enough, anything associated with dark arts is never simple. Secret chamber. Repeating the term, William squinted. Hogwarts had a secret chamber he didn't know about. This was simply astonishing. However, finding the truth didn't seem that difficult. He still clearly remembered who handed this diary to Ginny. Perhaps he could visit them sometime. But before that, William pulled a pen from Kabuta's belly and opened the diary. As soon as he opened the blank pages, a powerful mental force shot out from the diary, almost instantly rushing into William's mind. Feeling the scanning happening in his head, William's actions didn't falter. Acting as if he hadn't noticed, he began writing on the flyleaf, "Hello." In the next moment, the pen marks vanished as Ginny previously described. And then, watching the diary, which stopped responding after swallowing the ink, William frowned in confusion. Did he not act convincingly enough? Upon realizing the mental force, he immediately used occlumency to construct a memory vault of a novice magic user in his mind, but the force searched around and decisively withdrew, never to appear again. November 1st, sunny weather. William stubbornly wrote another line, but this time, the entity didn't even absorb the ink. Tisk. It seemed his ruse was seen through, so a visit to the Dear Malfoy clan would be inevitable. Feeling a bit frustrated, William put away the diary and started planning his schedule. He still had a date with the werewolves on Christmas, so the visit to the Malfoy family might have to wait until after the holidays. However, looking closely, without class, this year's schedule wasn't all that tight. Recalling his last year as a fifth year, battling trolls, dueling goblins, completing ancient magic trials, combating crime, mediating classmates' family disputes, pretending to be headmaster to give professors a break. Maybe I should find something else to do. William thought eagerly. A little wizard and the caretaker were attacked together in Hogwarts Castle. Much like the new transfer student this year, these are all rare events that happen once in a century. So, in the following days, everyone in the castle talked about Ron and Filch being attacked. The opening of the secret chamber didn't scare them. On the contrary, the news of Filch's petrification made nearly all the little wizards, except those who were caught by Snape for night wandering, quite happy. The corridor with the slogans even became a pilgrimage site in everyone's mind. Almost all the, accidentally, passing little wizards would stare at those scarlet letters for a long while, then turn back and solemnly share their guesses about the heir with their companions. Although very few of these guesses were reliable, Snape eventually became the top heir candidate, with the most votes. William heard he had received quite a few votes too, because he was a new student this year and seemed to have a tendency to claim Mrs. Loris for himself, so the reason for opening the secret chamber was to eliminate Filch. Time, person, motive, everything was complete. The elements were so complete that even William began to suspect himself, because that diary is truly in his hands now. Do you think, who could be the heir who opened the secret chamber? I don't know, it's not me. In the dining hall, at the Hufflepuff table, William shook his head, even though he had started persistently writing a diary daily, sincere and full of pearls of wisdom. But whether the other party was too cautious, or the power he left with Ginny reinforced the other party too much, to the extent their senses became overly sharp, the diary just wouldn't reveal anything, seeming no different from an ordinary diary. As for the diary's subjects, naturally they incorporated Cedric's current life, teenage years, love, troubles, everything perfectly matched what Ginny had told him. I never said it was you. Cedric shook his head, spreading jam on the bread slice in his hand, speaking softly. I still think the heir is Snape. You see, he hates half-bloods, dislikes Gryffindor, dislikes Harry Potter and his friends. Sitting opposite the two, Ernie Macmillan also joined the discussion, cautiously turning to look at the teacher's table. Snape was having a staring contest with a plate of fried fish. Plus, I heard Filch is a squib, which in the eyes of all pure-blood wizards is also a being. Snape is also a half-blood. William, suddenly inserting, poured the pudding in his bowl into his mouth. Yeah, you see what I'm saying, Oh, don't you guys know? Watching the sudden multiple gazes thrown at him, William wiped his mouth, somewhat puzzled. How do you know? Cedric asked, his face shocked. I have a friend. William indeed had a friend. As a werewolf, Fenrir Greyback was not favored by Voldemort during the Wizard War, not even having a dark mark as a Death Eater on his arm. Being long accustomed to exclusion and isolation, he naturally knew not to put all his chips in one place. Hence, he began investigating all the Death Eaters who had been frequenting around Voldemort, knowing that if he possessed enough information, as long as he confessed enough, comrades, the idiots at the Ministry of Magic would surely give him a way out. It was merely backstabbing fellow clansmen or teammates, a usual tactic of his. Moreover, to him, those black wizards hardly counted as teammates. Then what he feared indeed occurred. Voldemort genuinely fell. The Death Eaters scattered like monkeys when the tree falls, but perhaps the Ministry of Magic folks were idiotic beyond belief. Fenrir prepared a full list that ultimately wasn't used. This all was contributed to William. William now even knew which way the Malfoy family's door opens. Malfoy the fool knows well what I know, so he dares not report me to the Ministry of Magic, whereas I can spend the full moon night at his house playing games with his son. Thus, he must assist me. During the initial fall of the Dark Lord, also when the situation was the most tense, Fenrir relied on threatening Lucius Malfoy to receive support and finally survive. So perhaps, the next person to be attacked might be Snape. After all, in Hogwarts, the person with the most enemies is certainly him. Justin Finchley suddenly said from Macmillan's right side, and his speculation quickly gained unanimous agreement from everyone. Their faces changed at such a speed. Just moments ago, they were suspicious of Snape, yet now some were beginning to express sympathy. Of course, in most people's eyes there was schadenfreude not fearing the commotion getting bigger. I'll head out first. Borrowing the bread slice Cedric had spread with jam, William stood up. Ah. Cedric gazed blankly at his empty hands, hesitated for a moment. Wait a sec, why don't you come with me to the Quidditch pitch? Okay. And, the bread. I spread 3 layers of jam on it. Cough cough, Samo bread. William blinked, his mouth full. Today is Saturday. There will be a Quidditch match at noon. Currently, the atmosphere between Gryffindor and Slytherin is like a powder keg ready to explode. If not for professors sitting nearby, the stands would undoubtedly break out in a fight the next moment. Are you confident, Harry? In the locker room, Wood placed his hand on Harry's shoulder, his voice deep. Even if their brooms are better than ours, a Quidditch pitch isn't where having a rich daddy guarantees victory. So today, you must catch the snitch before Malfoy does, or die on the field, because today we must win. Tell me, are you confident? I am. Surveying his teammates around, Harry gripped his Nimbus 2000 tightly, feeling the wood's texture, he replied loudly. That's good, follow me. Wood stepped out of the locker room first. Gryffindor players in red uniforms filed out, the leaden gray sky hung low. Don't stress too much either, Harry. Before leaving, Fred winked at Harry. As Harry walked towards the pitch, he was greeted by a cacophony of noise. Of course, mainly with cheers and applause, as Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff both hoped to see Slytherin defeated, yet amidst, one could also hear booing and jeering from within the Slytherin crowd. With Ms. Hooch's final countdown, 14 brooms shot off into the sky, carrying their owners with them. The gloomy weather couldn't dampen the excitement of the little wizards for the Quidditch match. The quaffle is now in Marcus's hands, he's circling around Alicia, and now the only thing standing between him and the goal post is Wood. What? Angelina suddenly breaks in from the side, a fantastic steal. So impressive, no wonder I've been into her for years. Lee Jordan's commentary echoed across the field. Lee, talk about the game. Professor McGonagall's shout rang out not far from the commentary stand. Okay, Professor, I got it, Professor. Lee Jordan paused, then continued to shout, Angelina is heading straight for the Slytherin goal, she's getting close, soon she'll. Ah, Adrian, I thought you were only wasting air. Lee. Okay, Professor. The noisy field gave William a bit of a headache. Looking at the little wizards flailing their arms and legs around, he felt like he really couldn't fit in. He just couldn't find the fun in this sport, just like he never watched the World Cup in his previous life. About that diary. Hearing the voice beside him, William turned around helplessly. Honestly, Ginny, do you have to ask 3 or 4 times a day? The red-haired girl had somehow already sat behind him, and Luna was beside her, looking puzzled. The two were now almost inseparable outside of their respective common rooms, reportedly because Ginny started suspecting her roommates after the diary went missing and caused a stir by searching, and causing chaos, in the Gryffindor girls' dormitory, which almost got her ostracized by most Gryffindor girls. So Luna, who also didn't have many friends, naturally became her best friend. Ginny's mouth turned down slightly, looking a bit sad. Your brother's fine, he's just petrified, waiting for the mandrake. How many times have I said this? William shook his head, raised his voice slightly, and changed the topic. Why don't you look up? Harry Potter is flying pretty well. After regaining the diary, he asked Ginny about what she had written in it before and, after assuring her that he wouldn't tell anyone, he learned of her feelings for the savior. Pretty well. Cedric turned his head. That's an understatement. He's flying fantastic. I knew last year that Gryffindor would be our tough rival. Seriously, if you joined the team, with Silas graduating next year, he invited William again. No. William's refusal was as straightforward as ever. All right then, Cedric sighed, and turned back to the field. Wait, Ginny seemed to notice something, her pretty eyebrows furrowing slightly. Isn't Harry? Following her inquiry, the others instinctively looked up, seeing Harry awkwardly hanging onto his broom, with a pitch-black bludger relentlessly chasing close behind him. 2 red-haired figures were following Harry, using their bats to try and smack the bludger away, but to little effect. And because of the missing 2 beaters, Gryffindor's score fell behind by a large margin taken advantage of by Slytherin. Even Lee Jordan's commentary became lower. It started raining, and quite a few black umbrellas started popping up from the stands, as the gloomy weather seemed to have foretold today's weather. Someone tampered with that bludger. Cedric concluded with just a glance. Could it be Slytherin? Since the matter involved Harry, Ginny was even more anxious than she was when Ron was petrified. Who else could it be? Cedric said irritably. He despised such underhanded tricks to win games. Gryffindor called a timeout. Luna pointed to the field. In the rain curtain, Oliver Wood raised his hand towards referee Ms. Hooch, and a short whistle followed. In that case, is the game over? Impossible. Cedric shook his head firmly. Gryffindor won't just lose to Slytherin like that. Potter will certainly continue the match, even if it means dying on the field. You don't even know Harry Potter. But we're both seekers. TCH, no really, what's with all this enthusiasm? Seeing Cedric's face full of belief and passion, all William could feel was speechlessness. Was he really getting old? Just as Cedric predicted, after a brief timeout, the match continued. This time, Fred and George no longer tailed behind Harry, only to see the boy flying straight up into the sky alone while the black bludger still chased doggedly close behind him. At this rate, he'll surely die. Ginny raised her head, her face full of anxiety. The increasing rain obscured the view so much that soon those flying in the field became just blurry silhouettes. He won't die. William's tone was as resolute as Cedric's earlier. How do you know? Obviously, 'cause Harry Potter's the protagonist. If he dies, it's all over. Who in their right mind writes the protagonist off in their second year? Based on his memory and impression of Harry Potter, this kid has at least 7 years of school to complete. William said no more, keeping his eyes on the blurry silhouette highest in the sky, his eyes faintly gleaming blue. After a moment, he turned to look at the stands below. He initially thought Slytherin was behind this, but now it seems. Excuse me. William stood up. Where are you going? Cedric obediently moved his legs apart, asking instinctively. To the bathroom, want to come? I'd rather not. Sorry. Dobby is sorry, Harry Potter. The small figure stood trembling, tears kept falling from his large eyes, the ears folded behind his head revealing his inner anxiety, yet he kept his hands raised, fixating on the silhouette in the sky with blurry vision. Finally, the bludger struck hard against Harry's arm, and the small figure let out a cry of guilt simultaneously. Seeing Harry Potter finally crash into the muddy ground, the figure seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Dobby meant no harm to Harry Potter. Dobby did this to save you. Sorry. Seeing Harry holding the golden snitch high, the small figure shrieked and kept banging his head against the pillar below the stands. You're saying sorry, and yet you hit him with the ball. William's tone was somewhat odd. The figure was startled and raised its hand instinctively. Petrificus totalis. Petrificus totalis. The glow of the charm flashed, and before the figure's fingers could curl in, it dropped stiffly to the ground. House elf. William grabbed the figure by the hind leg and picked it up. Seems like it's not from Hogwarts. However, because these elves mostly look alike, William dared not claim he knew every elf in the school, so he planned to send it directly to the kitchen. There wasn't a shred of light in the pitch darkness. Dobby slowly opened his eyes. The blackness around him instinctively made him close them again. He seemed to be praying for some change the next time he opened his eyes, but evidently, it was of no use. Feeling his limbs still somewhat stiff, Dobby reached out with hope, intertwining his 3 fingers. Snap. With a crisp snap, a hazy deep blue glow began to light up around. Realizing his magic had lost its effect, Dobby's eyes filled with growing panic. He stared in horror at the surrounding blue light. The source was deep blue runes carved onto each of the iron bars, and Dobby finally saw his predicament. He was imprisoned by that person in a cage. Awake. After a mumbling voice, the next moment, the black cloth covering the cage was torn away, and dazzling daylight flooded in like a tide. Having gradually adapted to the dark, Dobby instinctively covered his eyes, his broad ears pinned back as he shrunk and took 2 steps back. But there wasn't much space in the cage. He had only stepped back 2 paces before he bumped into a bar. Why doesn't your cage burn people? The man swore unhappily, throwing the black cloth clutched in his hand to the ground, then cautiously leaning forward to withdraw his arm through the gap in his own cage. Differentiation, bloody hell. The man swore as he sat back within the safe zone. He looked at the house elf curled up in the corner of another cage, smacking his lips curiously. Hey, what did you do to end up here? He asked loudly. But the other did not answer him, and the elf, having adapted to the surroundings, quickly grasped. It looked around, raising its head to see the surroundings. Blinding sunlight trickled through the cracks in the ceiling, with countless stacks of heavy books forming walls, creating partitions in the room from its perspective only allowing a clear view forward. A towering cabinet connected to the brown-yellow ceiling, filled with a variety of magic materials at the top, a cauldron burning with a small flame at the bottom, bubbling and emitting thick smoke. A deep yellow diricol perched atop an armor-clad dummy's head but vanished with a puff before Dobby could react. Hey, I'm asking you a question. The man slammed the only cage panel not burning with his hand, shouting loudly. Dobby did nothing wrong. Dobby mumbled timidly, retreating to the farthest corner from the man. Hugging his knees, his eyes, almost the size of ping-pong balls, gleaming with tears, Dobby is only trying to save Harry Potter's life. As he uttered Harry Potter's name, he unhesitatingly lifted his hand and slapped himself hard twice. Hiss. The man's face twitched, and he asked again, Harry Potter, that punk who killed Voldemort. Dobby shivered and squeezed his eyes shut at the mention. You're going to save him. What do you mean? That kid, oh, the kid should be going to school. So, is this Hogwarts? No wonder that William often leaves for a long time. Is he attending classes? William never revealed anything useful to the man, and not even one pattern of Hufflepuff or Hogwarts had ever appeared on him. Fenrir once speculated about William's identity, but never considered him as a student. Ridiculous, a student wielding that Crucio, harsher than Voldemort. Maybe a professor, perhaps. But, wouldn't he be a bit too young for that? William's magical prowess, far beyond his youthful appearance, left Fenrir utterly perplexed. Hey, you're called Dobby, right? Fenrir shook his head, continuing to ask. He hadn't spoken to anyone other than William for months, finally having a sentient being to converse with. Whose elf are you? Dobby can't tell you. Dobby shouted shrilly, covering his large ears together. You're bad, you're the Dark Lord's. He continued to shiver. Servant, Dobby doesn't want to talk to you. Your master ordered it. Wait, you recognize me? The man frowned, suddenly realizing something. Dobby won't tell you. Is that so? Then while you're locked up here, how can you save that? Harry Potter. Fenrir smirked. Not in a hurry. Did your master give you orders for this? To protect Harry Potter. No, it's Dobby's own mission. Dobby hesitated, looking around in confusion. Dobby must protect Harry Potter because of the Dark Lords. Ah. Master told me to keep it secret. He realized, quickly standing up, and violently bashing his head against the bars. Bad Dobby, daring to defy Master's orders. Bad Dobby, bad Dobby, bad Dobby. Because of the Dark Lord. Fenrir muttered, watching the bleeding, headlong elf. He pounded the cage again. Stop bashing, your master can't even see you. Besides, you won't escape this cage even if you kill yourself banging. But Dobby remained silent, continuing to bash against the bars. Until he eventually fell unconscious. What did you do to it? Looking at the bloodied, unconscious elf in the cage, William frowned. After being tortured through 2 classes by Lockhart, that fool turning lessons into dramas was bad enough, but he even dragged people up to act. This forced him to endure a whole session of Marcus Flint's rendition of a cream boy. Sigh, he remembers 100 years ago Slytherin was quite decent. Despite the slightly high ratio of black wizards, most of the students had real skills, not to mention Ravenclaw's black wizard ratio wasn't that low either. Like his friends in Slytherin, Sebastian Seru and Aménis Gaunt, they were his dark arts initiation mentors after all. Moreover, just having a bit of dark magic doesn't make one a black wizard. Such black and white notions are mere stereotypes of first-year wizards. But now Slytherin, greasy-haired dandy, lazy ruffian, and even hulking trolls, really makes you want to Avada Kedavra. Ahem, this is getting obsessive. And, the other houses aren't much better. Can't be because he spared no effort back then, slightly overkilling some black wizards, causing British magic to fall into decline, right? Moreover, how many did he kill? Units, tens, hundreds, thousands. It's surely the fault of Voldemort, since he started the Wizard War. Call it a war, it certainly killed more than he did in those years. It's definitively like this. All Voldemort's fault, he truly deserved to die. This has nothing to do with me. Noticing William staring at him, Fenrir's expression stiffened slightly. He coughed twice. Isn't this how all those mindless house elves are? Any act of disloyalty towards their master, they'd punish themselves, as if it would make them feel better. Who is its master? William said while pulling open the drawer beside him. I don't know, couldn't get it out. Fenrir smacked his lips, watching as William sprinkled Dittany essence onto the elf's head. But it seems to know me, which proves its master might be one of my old friends, or enemies. As a green mist rose, the bleeding wound on the elf's forehead began to heal, covered with a layer of newly grown skin. The next moment, as William waved his hand, Dobby finally woke up, blinking dazedly. Ah! The moment it saw William, it remembered the figure who had cast the charm on it. Langlock. The piercing scream from the elf's mouth came to an abrupt halt, its tongue stuck to the roof of its mouth, making it unable to utter any sound. Accio Veritaserum. A green glass bottle flew off the shelf beside, landing in William's hand. He reached through the cage and pried open the elf's mouth as it resisted fiercely, then dropped 2 drops of Veritaserum through the gaps on either side of its tongue. Veritaserum. This is Muffiliato. Langlock. Petrificus totalis. Fenrir hadn't finished his sentence before William hit him with a silencing package, then pulled up the black cloth from the floor, covering the werewolf's cage. Since this guy found out William wasn't planning on killing him yet, he's been getting more and more reckless in his speech. Perfect, let's put him in the black room for a few days. Meanwhile, the Veritaserum began to take effect. The elf dazedly stood up. Its tongue had separated from its palate. It shook its ugly big head, seemingly resisting the effects of the Veritaserum. But evidently, it was futile. Soon, it leaned weakly against the railing, a pair of bulging eyes devoid of spirit. Since William knew the contents of his interrogation, to avoid unnecessary noise and a series of redundant operations, he chose to skip the extra steps and directly use Veritaserum, though that stuff is expensive, and very expensive, especially very expensive. But William didn't spend money. It was Kabuta, also known as the duck-billed thief, who snagged it from Snape's cloak. As the magic potion professor at Hogwarts, although Snape doesn't seem like a good person, his accomplishments in magic potion are absolutely profound. However, these days Kabuta has run to Luna's place. That young girl's affinity for magical creatures seems no less than William's. Hopefully, the little guy can snag more stuff from there. He's already got enough butter beer cork earrings. Hopefully, this time it can directly snag the Ravenclaw diadem. He searched for it for 2.5 years, turned the Ravenclaw common room upside down, but still found nothing. After a brief wait, the elf's mind slightly recovered, sufficiently able to answer questions but with little self-awareness. What's your name? William poised the notebook on his leg, spinning the pen in his hand. Dobby, my name is Dobby, the elf responded in a very light voice, its sharp, thin voice trembling somewhat. Who is your master? My master, my master is. Dobby's face showed a painful expression. It stammered, unable to speak. William seemed not in a hurry. He petted the Diricol that suddenly appeared on his leg, which he also brought back from the Forbidden Forest, patiently waiting. My master is Mr. Lucius Malfoy. Dobby seemed to suffer great torment, wanting to stand to continue punishing himself, but the Veritaserum's side effects rendered it immobile. No wonder this elf knows Fenrir Greyback, that werewolf used to leech off Malfoy Manor quite a bit. Looks like the priority of visiting Malfoy Manor needs to be increased. Perhaps, next weekend. William suppressed his thoughts, continuing to ask, why did you cast a spell on the bludger? Dobby wants to save Harry Potter's life. Even if he gets severely injured and sent home, it's better than staying at Hogwarts. Dobby only wishes for Harry Potter to get a little hurt, and then be sent home by the headmaster. Dobby's tone began to become rapid, its whole body trembling, appearing extremely agitated. But you almost killed him. William said expressionlessly, not that he was lying, given the state on the field that day. If it wasn't the protagonist sitting on the broomstick, they'd have fallen from the sky and been half dead. This elf clearly didn't control its level well. Harry was even swiftly sent to the hospital wing afterward. But, that was because a certain fool wanted to meddle unnecessarily. Not kill him. Dobby definitely didn't want to kill Harry Potter. Dobby made many efforts. Dobby made Harry Potter and his friends miss the train. Dobby caused Harry Potter to be locked up by his wicked muggle aunt and uncle. The elf's voice grew sorrowful. Dobby reminded Harry Potter again and again. But why won't he heed Dobby's warnings? Harry Potter missed the train, why doesn't he just go home? It rubbed its ears, somewhat regretfully. Oh good, so the reason I almost had an accident on the ship was because of you, punk. Cough, cough, why did you want Harry to go home? William frowned, continuing to ask. Because history repeated, because the secret chamber was opened again, because. Dobby's voice paused, seemingly extremely reluctant to say what came next, but the potion's effects pried open its mouth, because. Voldemort's plot looms over Hogwarts. History, Dark Lord, Secret Chamber. William quickly extracted several keywords, tapping the pen on his notebook. It was clear, does this matter relate to Voldemort's plot? He's not dead. Or not completely dead. Next weekend I'll go to Malfoy Manor. Lucius Malfoy should know quite a bit. After setting the plan, William pulled out the diary from the table and placed it in front of the elf. He still had to confirm one thing. But just one glance at that diary, Dobby's tightly strung nerves suddenly broke, rolling its eyes, then after a miserable cry, it foamed at the mouth and collapsed. Seems it's related to Voldemort without a doubt. Hermione, why did you call me here? Stuffing the scattered textbooks back into his bag, Harry's tone wasn't too pleasant. It had been nearly a month since the attack, and a week since the terrifying Quidditch match. Although Lockhart had directly pulled out all the bones in his arm, Ms. Pomfrey's bone regeneration potion got him out of the hospital wing the next day. But that feeling. In short, Harry had briefly replaced his most hated professor with Lockhart in his heart. Of course, this ranking only lasted until half an hour ago, because he had just finished a potions class. In comparison, that old bat was obviously still more aggravating. And recently, a rumor had surfaced from who knows where, saying that Professor Snape was actually a half-blood wizard, and some little wizards even suspected Snape of being the heir to the secret chamber and vowed to apologize to him in person. Harry vaguely remembered Snape's expression at the time. If looks could kill, the Great Hall would probably have been filled with corpses. For the next 2 weeks, the old bat's expression never improved. For instance, in the just-ended second-year potions class, he scolded 6 little wizards in a row, and naturally, Harry was not ignored either. That half-cooked swelling potion of his was completely dumped into the trash by Snape. During this period, Hermione seemed to have her own matters to attend to. Every time Harry ran into her in the Gryffindor common room, they just exchanged a brief greeting before she would turn around and leave the common room, hugging a thick tome. With Ron petrified in the hospital wing and Hermione busy with who knows what, Harry suddenly realized he didn't even have a speaking friend left. Couple that with Lockhart's and Snape's alternating torment, his mood recently was abysmal. This morning, Hermione, who had disappeared for quite a while, suddenly showed up, telling Harry to meet after school in the afternoon. I thought we had broken up. Looking at Hermione's vanishing figure, he barely had time to say, okay, before he muttered to himself. After potions class, Harry finally saw the late-arriving Hermione 15 minutes past the appointed time. Phew, sorry, I mistook the time. The girl leaned against the hallway pillar, gasping for air. Her fluffy hair seemed a bit neglected during this period, almost twisted into a tangled mess atop her head. As usual, her arms were cradling 2 hefty books. Judging by her bag slung behind her, it might have been more than just a couple. Powerful potions. Harry helped her with the stack of books, eyeing the top one with its moldy cover curiously flipping through it, then immediately closed it back up. Heaven knows what he had just seen. A witch with 8 arms on her head. This is. Shish, I borrowed this from the forbidden book area last week. Hermione quickly gestured for silence. Leading Harry down the stairs, she continued in a lowered voice, I got Lockhart's signature, but unfortunately, Madame Pants wouldn't let me keep it. If it's Lockhart, you probably just need to leave a blank piece of paper on his desk. Harry smirked, obviously unimpressed. In under 10 minutes, he would fill it with his name. So, have you been busy getting Lockhart's autograph all this time? Harry's tone was a bit sharp, clearly peeved at Hermione for neglecting him lately. Of course not. Hermione looked astounded, as if wondering why Harry would ask such a thing. Remember the night of Halloween? She pointed to the hallway not far in front of them. It turned out they had already reached the corridor where Ron and Filch were attacked. I remember, it was right here. Harry stopped walking, looking up toward the top of the stairs. At that time, Ron and Filch were wrestling at the end of the staircase. He and Hermione had just turned the corner following the noise and saw them both petrified on the spot. At this moment, looking again, Harry noticed a small figure crouched at the top of the stairs. Meow. Mrs. Loris. Seeing the sleek, gray cat, Harry incredulously rubbed his eyes, but that raspy voice, like claws scratching glass, confirmed the cat's identity. After all, even if it was a bit plumper, the only large gray cat in the castle was Mrs. Loris. I often see it here. Hermione stepped forward, stroking Mrs. Loris's head under her wary gaze. To Harry's shock, Mrs. Loris didn't dodge as usual, though she didn't lean into Hermione's palm either. This was unbelievable compared to before. Squeak. A curious, short cry came from under Mrs. Loris. Next moment, a black niffler peeked out from her gray fur, its pink snout sniffing around before locking on Hermione. Hello. Hermione greeted, surprised. Where did this niffler come from? She hadn't seen it before. That's William's niffler, named Kabuta. Ginny brought it into the common room. Harry stepped forward, reaching out to touch Kabuta's head, only to have it swatted down by a cat's paw. Huff. A low, threatening growl rumbled in Mrs. Loris's throat. Oh, the two of them get along well. Watching the niffler struggle to finally climb onto the cat's head, Hermione remarked happily. She had always liked cats, and this niffler didn't seem like a vicious creature. So, Hermione, why did you bring me here? Harry rubbed at the scratch on his hand. Mrs. Loris had no habit of retracting her claws, feeling even more annoyed. He asked irritably, if it's just to see a cat, I'm not interested, I've got Quidditch practice tomorrow morning. Hold on, I've been working on this. Hermione diverted her attention from Mrs. Loris, rummaging through her bag and then pulling out a large water jug filled with water. She stood on the stairs, posing in a manner incredibly familiar to Harry. It was the same stance when Ron was attacked. Harry remembered it clearly from that sleepless night in the hospital wing. What do you mean? Harry, stand up. Hermione shook her head playfully, signaling for Harry to stand opposite her. Grab my arm, like how Filch grabbed Ron. And then, Harry did as asked, though he frowned, but what's the point? And then, Hermione didn't answer. She opened the jug and poured it at their feet. Hey, what do you mean by this? Harry hadn't finished his question when he seemed to realize something, looking up. By the light from the torches on the wall, he clearly saw a regular-shaped hole appear in the impenetrable bricks of Hogwarts Castle. You mean? He subconsciously looked at Hermione. Click. The sound of a camera shutter went off, Colin Creevey peeking from behind his camera, looking at the two entwined individuals. Hey, Harry, are you two dating? What? Seeing Colin, Harry instinctively let go of Hermione's hand. Hearing the somewhat jarring word, dating, another girl's face involuntarily popped into Harry's mind. Long black hair, black eyes, he'd heard she was Ravenclaw's seeker. A seeker and a seeker, they were a perfect match. Oh, I mean, good afternoon, Harry. Colin paused, lowered the new camera from his neck. What are you doing here? Are you investigating clues related to the attacks? He looked around, as if realizing something. Oh, no, of course not, Colin. Harry, who had already imagined a scene of flying on a broomstick with someone, finally came back to his senses. He sighed a bit helplessly. This first-year little wizard in front of him was practically his number one shadow, following him everywhere, most of the time holding a camera constantly taking pictures. The night he ended up in the hospital wing thanks to Lockhart, Ron's petrification was just a small factor for his sleeplessness. The key was that this boy suddenly appeared in the hospital wing in the middle of the night and took 30 or 40 photos of him. The boy seemed quite satisfied with his new digital camera, even more diligent than before in staking out for photos. So you're here. We were just passing by, and coincidentally, said hello to Mrs. Loris. Harry quickly made up an excuse. He knew Colin's personality. If you answered one of his questions, countless more questions would follow. So, nipping it in the bud was the way. He squatted down, pretending to reach out to Mrs. Loris's cat, but the gray cat just gave Harry a cool glance, then it flicked its tail, got up, and slowly walked away along the corridor, disappearing from the three's sight. Sorry, we have other things to do. Harry awkwardly looked up at the gap there, turned his head to exchange a glance with Hermione, and after her assuring nod, he said to Colin, "So, we have to go now. As for the photos, next time, definitely next time." With that, Harry grabbed his and Hermione's school bags and quickly left in the opposite direction Mrs. Loris departed. "You really are popular." Turning the corner, ensuring Colin didn't follow, the two found a deserted corner, and Hermione raised an eyebrow. "Hermione, you know, I don't want this." Harry was a bit impatient. The current level of popularity was already starting to seriously affect his normal school life. "All right, I was just joking." Hermione tossed her hair, somewhat dismissively. "All right, now, you're thinking the same thing I am, right?" Harry nodded, suppressing the frustration in his heart, and asked. "That night, we both saw it. Ron and Filch weren't hit by some charm as Dumbledore said, were they? They were both looking at the water on the floor, because there was a restroom next to it, and then they got petrified." Hermione nodded, her expression turning serious. "Charm. I remember it was Lockhart who said that." Harry muttered softly. "Really? Maybe he misjudged, and a mistake once isn't much." Hermione grinned, trying to brush it off. "If only it were once." Harry said, visibly annoyed, with a somewhat rough tone. "That day, Lockhart made my bones disappear. Do you know what it's like to have bone regeneration potion?" That was just. Hermione wanted to retort but ended up at a loss for words, so she changed the subject. "That incident isn't related to the attacks, we're not discussing Professor Lockhart now." Noticing Hermione's attempt to change the topic, Harry didn't plan on arguing further with her, so he smoothly shifted the conversation back on track. "Okay, so what you're trying to say is, I collected some construction maps of Hogwarts recently." Hermione pulled out a stack of drafts from her bag, and from those, she took out one relatively clear picture. "These are images I copied from Hogwarts, a history of the school." On the messy drafts, there was a rough outline of a castle, surrounded by annotated texts, almost guiding most of the rooms. Woven into the castle bricks were intricate, twisted, and chaotic red lines. "They're drainage pipes," Hermione explained. "You mean, the monster from the secret chamber is hiding in these pipes?" Harry said, somewhat incredulous, frowning. "Then why have there been no more attacks after Halloween? Although I don't know why the victims were petrified, this is definitely the most likely explanation." Hermione hesitated. She speculated tentatively, maybe the heir didn't open the secret chamber again. "No, Malfoy would never give up this opportunity." "What do you mean, Harry? You're saying Malfoy is the heir of the secret chamber? Who else would it be?" Harry's tone was a bit amazed, evidently not understanding why Hermione didn't suspect Malfoy. "Snape is a half-blood wizard, and in all of Slytherin, Malfoy is the most likely one." "Ah, I thought you had evidence." Hermione subtly rolled her eyes. "If it's just that, actually, that transfer student William was also suspected by many people." "No, it could not possibly be William," Harry declared confidently, although he didn't quite know where this confidence came from. "So what should we do? Even if we know the monster's hiding place, how do we persuade the professor to inspect the drainage pipes?" Harry looked down at the map, the maze of pipe lines making him a bit dizzy. "Shrinking potion. I originally thought it would be troublesome, went specifically to the Forbidden Book area, but only a potion a third year can learn is needed. It's simple, all the materials are even in the potions class material cabinet." Before Hermione could finish her plan, a serious look crossed Harry's face. He tilted his head, starting to listen carefully. "Why? Where are you? I'm so hungry, hungry, hungry. Kill, I want to kill." Like whispers from a demon in hell, Harry's face visibly turned grim. Looking at the two disappearing around the corner, Colin fiddled a bit dejectedly with the dial on his camera. The few photos just taken appeared on the display. He stared at the two figures almost hugging each other for a long while, finally noticing the direction Harry was looking at in the picture. He looked up, and the neatly arranged gap at the center of the bricks caught his attention. "Take a shot." The thought had barely formed when the boy instinctively raised the camera. Snap! In the darkness, a brilliant yellow light emerged. The second attack has occurred. The witnesses remain Harry Potter and his little companions. Things gradually started to seem off since the first attack, because the victim was once Harry Potter's former best friend. So, except for very few exceptions in Slytherin House, almost no one suspected Harry was the heir, even though he was at the scene during the attack. But the second incident is completely different. Let's not mention that the crime scene was the same, the method was the same, and even the eyewitnesses were exactly the same. Isn't this a bit too coincidental? Additionally, everyone knows that Harry Potter is often secretly photographed by the Muggle wizard who was attacked. And sources have revealed that Harry Potter was bothered by this, having expressed his dislike for the victim publicly several times. So, Harry Potter suddenly, defeated, the new transfer student and Snape, quickly becoming the number one suspect, is the heir of the secret chamber. Plus, the last few photos in Colin's camera before he was murdered were somehow leaked, leading to the most popular theory now. Harry Potter opened the Chamber of Secrets to eliminate the most troublesome from the trio, so he could enjoy a world for two with Hermione Granger. Colin Creevey discovered this truth and paid the price. As for why Harry wanted to inform the professor, I've seen a lot of movies where the real culprit often returns to the crime scene after things are over, said a certain Muggle wizard confidently. In the Gryffindor common room, the usual cheerful music was absent today, creating an eerie atmosphere hanging over the room. Almost half of the Gryffindor little wizards gathered on one side, and even the normally boisterous Weasley twins were sitting quietly on the sofa, their red heads clustered together as if holding a family meeting. The scarlet fire burned in the red brick fireplace, the crackling sound of wood burning typically soothing, but now Harry found it increasingly annoying. The normally warm flame offered no comfort, and he picked up the poker leaning against the fireplace to gently stir the flames, the glow obscuring his facial expressions. Harry. Seeing the flickering shadows, Hermione poked her head out from behind the thick complete edition of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, curiously looking at the boy stirring the fire. The moment the girl spoke, the persistent murmurings in the common room abruptly paused, then quickly turned into a noisy hum. I'm going back to the dormitory. Harry took a deep breath, feeling his limbs growing colder, stood up, and prepared to leave the room. Wait, didn't we agree to stay together tonight? Hermione frowned, watching the boy's back. I'm tired. Harry shook his head, he didn't hesitate, and soon disappeared at the staircase leading to the boys' dormitory. As Harry left the common room, the air in the Gryffindor common room seemed to ignite completely, the previously suppressed discussions no longer hidden, loudly commenting on the recently departed boy. Hey, Weasley, so is it or isn't it? A sixth-year boy loudly asked the cluster of red hair, glanced at Hermione who hadn't left, and coughed twice hurriedly, is it what everyone says? Percy's expression was hesitant, he frowned deeply, but before he could answer, Ginny stood up first. Of course not, are you people only capable of gossiping behind others' backs? Her emotions grew agitated, and her face flushed, nearly matching the color of her hair. But we can't be sure, Ginny. Percy shook his head. Yeah, I also believe Harry isn't like that, but... George spoke hesitantly, his voice tinged with doubt. Ginny looked incredulous, her unremarkable chest heaving intensely as she scanned the faces of her three brothers, took a deep breath, and turned to leave the common room silently. Where are you going? Curfew is coming. Percy frowned. But all that responded was the fat lady's disgruntled muttering. We need to find her, it's Snape on duty tonight. Fred murmured, standing up, patting his pocket as if confirming something. I'll go, I need to discuss something with her. Hermione appeared beside the trio, her gaze lingering at the spot where Ginny disappeared. Somehow, she felt a premonition. Hermione, actually we didn't suspect Harry, it's just. Having been caught speaking ill by the protagonist, George scratched his head, feeling a bit guilty. He was being honest, though Harry's appearance was too coincidental this time, and the subject refused to explain anything. I know, but you're not suited to find Ginny. Hermione nodded, finding an excuse, you'd only end up arguing with her. Fred and George exchanged glances, then nodded knowingly. Hermione was right, Ginny would only argue with them. All right, too bad Harry already left, otherwise he'd be the best choice. Fred nodded, then stealthily pulled a roll of parchment from under his cloak behind Percy. It's up to you then, an essential companion for night excursions. What's this? There are instructions inside, though we haven't completely figured it out yet. Fred shrugged, and George leaned over to add, we nicked it from Filch during our first year. This little baby taught us more than all the school's professors combined. As they spoke, they simultaneously winked at Hermione. You can try it yourself, they whispered in unison. Okay. Hermione accepted the parchment somewhat confusedly and pushed open the portrait of the fat lady. Return quickly, bring Ginny. Percy commanded sternly from behind her. One by one, just before curfew and they're running off. The fat lady grumbled, reluctantly stepping aside, I think this is just too much. Hermione didn't answer, stepping out of Gryffindor Tower quickly, then unfolded the parchment by the torchlight. Blank. The girl examined it up and down, and as she did, a blank sheet fell out from the inner layer. Picking up the paper, reading the characters on it, Hermione incredulously raised her wand against the parchment's center. Ah, I solemnly swear, I am up to no good. As her voice faded, ink began to appear on the blank parchment. Under the girl's astonished gaze, these lines and ink spots formed an extremely intricate map of the castle. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauder's Map. And just this wasn't enough to surprise her. She saw the names appearing in the corridors. Ginny Weasley was in the middle of the corridor 2 levels beneath her. Professor Snape had just left his office. Nearly headless Nick was wandering the Great Hall. She even spotted her own name, standing at the entrance of Gryffindor Tower. This. Hermione intently took a deep breath, then as though realizing something, aimed the map at the light, frantically searching up and down. All right, there isn't a word on the map called Monster in the Secret Chamber. This discovery made Hermione a bit disappointed. Well, maybe I overthought it. Hermione sighed. Perhaps this map only marks humans and ghosts in the castle. Or maybe the monster in the secret chamber hasn't been named. Hermione thought the second guess might be correct, as at some unknown time, a small dot appeared to the right of the dot representing Hermione Granger on the map. Ah, hello. Looking at the big cat squatting beside the armor, Hermione awkwardly greeted it. As the pet of the castle caretaker, Mrs. Loris has always been Filch's trusty assistant in catching little wizards wandering at night. If you accidentally see this cat while wandering at night, it means Filch and detention isn't far from you. But ever since Filch was attacked and stayed in the hospital wing, Mrs. Loris lost this intimidation, and the cat had also somewhat recovered from its sickly appearance due to a better diet. It has changed from a cat everyone hated to one that most people would pat on their way. Of course, as for whether you get scratched afterward, that would depend on your luck. And Hermione seems to have been quite lucky these days. Moving her gaze away from Mrs. Loris, Hermione looked again at the map in her hand. A dot representing Ginny was now continuing downwards, seemingly heading for the hall, but what would she do in the hall at this time? Seeing Snape walking up from the dungeons on the map, Hermione took a deep breath. She needed to speed up, or Ginny being caught by Snape was only a matter of time. She put away the Marauder's Map in her hand and quickly left the tower via the spiral staircase. Mrs. Loris silently stared in the direction the girl left, her long tail standing upright behind her. Chirp chirp. A niffler climbed onto her head, and after a short chirp, Mrs. Loris slowly stood up and started jogging in the direction the girl had left. The girl hastily passed through the corridors. Apart from being a biddery at night, the castle was not much different from daytime, with whispers constantly coming from the portraits, ghosts occasionally floating past the ceiling, and armor that would punch itself apart and start singing loudly as soon as someone passed by. All this nonsense was there during the day too. Descending the stairs in front of the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom quickly, Ginny sighed. It wasn't her first time leaving the Gryffindor common room after curfew, but it was the first time she did so, alone. Since the instigator in the diary had left her, she hadn't acted alone in the middle of the night. But this time it was really out of necessity, even without the interruption from the family meeting. She was desperate to know why. Although William had emphasized many times that the diary had been properly kept, why did the attacks still happen? Could it be that they guessed wrong, that the diary wasn't related to the attacks, the secret chamber, and the heir? But the diary did indeed appear on Ron. Either, that transfer student has been lying all along. He's the real heir. Thinking of this, the expression on Ginny's face began to stiffen. She simply couldn't imagine. If William had been deceitful all along, then her actions in seeking him now. The girl stopped in her tracks subconsciously, her face uncontrollably showing a horrified expression. Right, after the diary was lost, All the information she got was almost entirely conveyed by William. Could it be, if the opposite side is indeed the heir, what would happen? Although they are both new students, Ginny hardly thinks she can handle a fifth-year student. Moreover, judging from William's usual behavior, the opposite side isn't some half-muggle who just got introduced to magic. Maybe she should tell a professor. But then, which professor would believe a first-year little wizard who just entered school? Take it easy, Ginny, think of something positive, maybe things aren't as bad as they seem. The girl took a deep breath, beginning to silently comfort herself. She continued to walk down the stairs, but the psychological self-comfort didn't seem to work well, and the unexpected happened. Crack. With a crisp sound, Ginny's calf fell directly into a crack on the staircase from the second floor to the first floor, and her chaotic thoughts made her completely forget there was a collapse here. Ginny instinctively tried her best to pull herself out of the staircase. But in the next moment, a voice she never wanted to hear echoed from not far downstairs. Who's there? The ominous voice, just listening to it made her feel physically uncomfortable. Snape. It's Snape's duty tonight. She actually forgot such an important thing. The more anxious, the easier mistakes happen. Listening to the increasingly closer footsteps, Ginny almost gave up. But just at this moment, someone grabbed her shoulder from behind. As the two exerted force together, the girl's calf was finally pulled out from the staircase crack. Hermione. Run. Hermione looked at the parchment in her hand and pulled Ginny's arm, starting to run wildly towards the corridor on the right. After turning 7 or 8 corners, she opened the nearest bathroom door and the two girls rushed in. Huff, good, he didn't catch up here. Seeing Snape choosing another direction 3 forks away on the map, Hermione finally breathed a sigh of relief. What is this? Looking at the Marauder's map in the girl's hand, Ginny asked subconsciously. Yeah, what is this? This is the Marauder. Hermione replied subconsciously, but before she finished speaking, she realized something, turned to look at the rear of the two. Immediately, 3 distinctly different screams rang out in the bathroom. Harry, actually we all believe you aren't the heir. In the Gryffindor boys' dormitory, Neville in his pajamas was earnestly expressing his support to Harry, while Dean and Seamus beside him nodded earnestly too. I know. Harry responded somewhat helplessly. Although knowing there were still people believing him made his mood much better, but, the boy looked at the empty bed in the room, his eyes reflecting a hint of loneliness. Where are you? I want to kill. No one can obstruct me. I want to tear apart. Without any warning, a voice seemingly from hell once again echoed in the boy's ears. Harry lowered his head instinctively, this time the voice seemed to be coming from below the floor. You know, Harry, Shush. Harry jumped off the bed, pressing his ear close to the floor, listening intently. What's wrong with you? Neville blinked uncomprehendingly. But Harry didn't answer. He seemed to swiftly pull something from under the bed and then ran out of the dorm without saying a word. What happened to him? Could it be he's going to plan the next attack? Seamus's expression turned somewhat horrified. Didn't you say you believe him? Neville countered. Since when? Who are you? The girl's gaze scrutinized the 2 little wizards who suddenly intruded into her territory through her thick lenses. Oh, wait, I remember you. Moaning Myrtle patted her head, pointing at one of the girls in front of her, shouting, I remember you. She kept repeating, emotionally agitated, her semi-transparent body rippling. You were the one who laughed at me at the Death Day party. Hey, lower your voice. Ginny tried to interrupt, but the crying Moaning Myrtle, or rather, the spirit true to her name, once her tear ducts were activated, tears flowed freely like an open floodgate from her pair of transparent little eyes. You think I don't know what others call me behind my back? Fat Moaning Myrtle. Ugly Moaning Myrtle. Poor, weepy, moody Moaning Myrtle. Moaning Myrtle covered her eyes and turned to rush into the cubicle. A stream of water gushed up to the ceiling from behind the cubicle door. I should just kill myself. I should die. No, I'm already dead. A muffled voice accompanied by the sound of water issued from behind the door. What's her problem? Looking at the bathroom in front of her, Ginny scratched her head a bit bewildered. Yes, I have problems. I have a little problem of having already died and can't die again. A shriek came from behind the cubicle. A large patch of water began to seep out from under the door. Well, it seems we can't stay here. Hermione looked at the parchment in her hand, and after ensuring that no one was around in the corridor, finally nodded. Wait a moment. Ginny signaled, frowning. She stepped into the water. She stroked the metallic wash basin. The confusion in her eyes grew thicker. I feel like I've been here before. The girl said softly. This is a girl's bathroom, maybe at some time, Hermione said instinctively, but in the next moment, she saw the expression on Ginny's face. Oh, alright, is it different from what you said? Ginny shook her head without answering. Her fingertips glided over the wash basin until. We really should go. Seeing the cold water already up to her calves, Hermione quickly stowed away the parchment and grabbed the girl's shoulder to lead her out of the bathroom. The cold wind of December was biting. Finally, Ginny seemed to come to herself. Watching Hermione drying the hem of her wizard robe after pulling her to a dry place, she instinctively bit her lip. Did you have a fight with Percy today? Hermione asked without looking up. At that time both were in the passageway from the stairway to the great hall on the first floor. She had just glanced before leaving the bathroom. Snape was already on the fourth floor, and another patrolling Professor Flitwick had just come down from Ravenclaw Tower. So, this place was temporarily safe, as long as Peeves didn't come running from the hall to make trouble. At the mention of Percy, Ginny's face quickly darkened. Sort of, I can't figure out why they would suspect Harry Potter. He stayed at our house for half the summer, can't they see what kind of person he is? When talking about Harry, the girl's face began to flush involuntarily. Maybe, those boys' brains might be located elsewhere. Hermione immediately nodded in agreement. She understood a principle well. If you want to find out secrets from someone, it's best to go along with them, but, do you trust Harry so much? She lowered her voice, speaking mysteriously. What do you mean? Ginny was a bit confused. She didn't want to show her curiosity, but since it concerned Harry Potter, she couldn't suppress her inner urge, and she could only stare at Hermione with her brown eyes inherited from her mother. Ginny of course knew how close Hermione and Harry were. To be honest, although she completely disagreed with the rumor that Harry was the heir of the secret chamber, the gossip about Harry and Hermione still affected her. Harry is actually hiding something from me. Hermione lowered her voice again. Seeing Ginny's attention caught, a trace of joy flashed in her eyes. I am not. A voice full of resistance sounded from an empty spot nearby. Harry. Hermione instinctively looked over, but there was nothing there. Ginny was also startled. She instantly jumped behind armor against the wall. Oh, this beautiful lady. The armor bowed its head. Shut up. Ginny didn't look up. All right. The armor raised its head. Is that you, Harry? Hermione frowned tightly. She had sensed in the common room that Ginny definitely knew something about the attacks, but the situation she had been in was disrupted by that single sentence. It was impossible for her not to be annoyed. Of course, it's me, who else could it be? Harry lifted the invisibility cloak off him, appearing out of nowhere in front of them. Seeing the boy appear, Ginny timidly shrank her head back behind the armor. I thought you were asleep. When did you come? Hermione asked. When Ginny mentioned I stayed at the Weasley family. Harry instinctively turned his head to the side, as the girl who had just peeked out half of her head from behind the armor disappeared again. If you'd said you've been here all along, it would have been fine. Hermione patted her forehead, sighing helplessly. After being caught up in this situation by Harry, she probably wouldn't get any answers tonight. But Harry evidently didn't intend to let her off so easily. So, you just said I'm hiding something from you. He glared at Hermione, his tone full of questioning, clearly intending to get to the bottom of it. No, nothing at all. Hermione took a deep breath. She felt a bit like cursing. You're suspecting me too, aren't you, even though every time you've been with me when we saw those people. Harry completely missed Hermione's mood. He shouted loudly, seemingly venting all his recent dissatisfaction. Since Ron got petrified, when have we talked for more than 10 minutes? You've been doubting me since then, haven't you? The more Harry spoke, the more he felt his reasoning was correct. The sense of being subtly isolated was all vented. So you've started distancing yourself from me since then. Hermione's protests were weak in comparison. I haven't. Just because I heard different voices. Heard what voices? A hand patted Harry on the shoulder from behind. That familiar warmth once again swept through his body in an instant. Emotions already stirred. Harry turned around tearfully. Mom. The boy's voice was a bit hoarse from his earlier shouting. No, you're doing this again. William recoiled as if electrocuted, withdrawing his right hand. Thanks for watching.